And now a moment from the Bruce Prichard Archives, episode 50, Austin Walks Out.
Scott was taking a drug called Antabuse. And Antabuse is a drug that if you drink alcohol, it makes you violently ill. So Scott's got his mouth taped and he's having beer poured on him, and Scott starts to get sick.
What a fucking weird business. I mean,
well, I don't know that he knew beer was going to be poured on him.
It makes it even worse.
How would we know?
You didn't know that he had substance issues and that he was an alcoholic.
We knew he had substance issues.
So let's pour beer on him.
But if you can't get, that's not fair either.
How is it not fair?
Get out of the business if you can't handle it.
Listen to you. This is a guy who has an addiction problem and is working hard to get clean. And just to be a dick, you guys want to pour beer on him. And then your attitude is, well, if you can't handle it, get out. No, I'm saying based on your argument. I'm saying that if you come into the business and he knows what he's getting into, and if that's a problem, then speak up. Whoa. You just said 2 sentences ago, Jack Dick, that he didn't know he was getting beer poured on him. You guys knew he was an alcoholic and you poured beer on him as a surprise out of your own mouth right there. No, it wasn't a surprise. No, you just said he didn't know. Completely taking it out of context. How should I take it? You're in the moment.
From episode 50, Austin Walks Out, and much, much more is available in the archives of Something to Wrestle With, Bruce Prichard.
Have you or someone you know been diagnosed with mesothelioma? You probably have many questions, such as, what should I do? Where can I get more information? RGT4Law.com can answer those questions and help you get the money you deserve. Call 855-RGT4Law or visit RGT4Law.com and fill out the simple form for a free consultation. Robert Taylor, R.G. Taylor II, PC and Associates, Houston, Texas.
Welcome to Something to Wrestle With. Bruce Prichard.
Well, that's not a rib. She pooted. No, there's no box of gimmicks.
Rumor and innuendo.
I don't deal in rumor and innuendo. And was he there? I was there. I don't give a shit. I ain't scared of shit.
I ain't scared of shit.
Fuck him.
You, Bruce.
I love you take the chicken, double cheeseburger, you take the gravy, well, and then double it's called chicken salad.
Hey, it's Conrad Thompson, and you're listening to Something to Wrestle With. Bruce Prichard. Bruce, what's going on, man? How are you?
It's just another day in paradise here at Casa de Prichard.
Well, I'll tell you what, it has been quite an eventful week in my life, needless to say. We want to send lots of love out to the Nature Boy himself. He's obviously had a challenging week this week, and we wouldn't even be doing this show right now if it weren't for Ric Flair. Would you agree with that?
I wholeheartedly agree with that. I wouldn't be where I am in life right now if it wasn't for the Nature Boy Ric Flair, meeting Conrad Thompson and changing my life the way that you have. But it all goes back, and it all can be traced back to one Ric Flair. And Rick, this is me just wishing you a very speedy recovery. And he's got a long, obviously you know a lot more than I do, but he's got a long, hard road ahead of him, and if anybody can do it, he can do it.
Absolutely. He's overcome bigger obstacles before, and he'll do it here. I apologize for not being as responsive on social media this week. I was bombarded with questions. I didn't feel like it was my place to give those updates. Charlotte is posting updates when the family is ready to do that. So I'm not ignoring you because I don't like you. I'm ignoring you out of respect for the family. So I hope everyone understands that, but we don't want to ignore last week's show, Bruce. We got lots of great feedback about last week's episode. I thought it was one of our more fun episodes. I really enjoy talking about 96 and 97, and they feel like really critical years. What was the feedback you got from SummerSlam 1996?
For the most part, everything was positive. I think that people kind of felt like you and I did, that it was one of our best shows as far as us having fun. And I had an awful lot of fun with the show and just kind of going back and forth. And I'm glad that our audience kind of heard that in our voices, if you will, as we went through that show.
Well, let's get ready with this week's fun. But first, we want to remind you, this is your last chance to come see us this weekend in New York City. Saturday is completely sold out, but there's still a chance to pick up tickets for Sunday. It's Gramercy Theater in Manhattan. You'll be done in plenty of time to still check out SummerSlam. The show starts at 12:30, and you can pick up your tickets at boxofgimmicks.com. We are working on a monstrous surprise. Obviously, it's been a pretty eventful week for everyone involved, but we have got a huge surprise in the works for Sunday. I don't want to throw a spoiler out there, but I will say you will not be disappointed. You're going to have some laughs. You're going to have a good time. Please join us, boxofgimmicks.com. You'll be glad you did, and we'll be back on the other side. All right, Bruce, it's time for What Happened When Razor Ramon came to the World Wrestling Federation. Now, unfortunately, we don't get to tell the story of how Razor first came to be because Bruce wasn't there. But it wasn't too long after that Bruce was welcomed back into the family, pulled out of timeout. His permanent vacation was made temporary. He was off double secret probation, whatever you want to call it. Bruce was back in the business in August or September of 92, Bruce?
September 1992.
So how much of the business were you keeping up with? I mean, obviously you were kind of back and forth with WCW, WWF. What am I going to do? We've talked about all that on prior episodes, but you had seen the Razor vignettes. Razor had made his television debut, and you come in and pick it up from there.
Well, absolutely. And I was keeping up with the business because I wanted back in the business and I wanted to be back working at the WWF. And Razor had come in. Scott Hall had come in as Razor Ramon. It was a whole brand new gimmick and a brand new character that just fit their larger than life cartoon character personas. So Scott Hall as Razor Ramon was somebody that Vince McMahon could sink his teeth into and really get behind, that over the top character.
And the over-the-top character that was rumored to be saddled with him was a bit of a, not so much the diamond stud gimmick that he was doing in WCW, but a G.I. Joe, because Razor Ramon grew up in an army family, so he bounced around quite a bit. And Razor supposedly kind of shot that down and wanted to do more of the Scarface character. And of course, in typical Vince McMahon fashion, he told Scott that he had not seen the movie, and that was kind of a shock to everyone, I'm sure, because it's one of the more iconic gangster movies of all time, and you would think that would be something Vince would be into, but for whatever reason, he hadn't seen it, and the Tony Montana character in Scarface was kind of the genesis for this whole Razor Ramon character. Is that the way you understood it?
Without a doubt. It was a character that Razor used to do with Kurt Hennig and Hey Yo, Chico, and he did the Al Pacino Scarface accent. He and Kurt would go back and forth and had their little routines that they would do when they would travel in the car, and had told Vince about this. So he did the character for Vince, and of course Vince fell in love, and the rest, as they say, is history.
According to the rumor and innuendo, Tito Santana gets credit for helping name him Razor Ramon. Did you hear that same story?
No, I didn't. That's when I came in, it was all Vince, man, talking about Razor and the whole, you talk about Scarface and the cocaine and you're chopping it up with a razor. And I think that's more where it came from than anything, but Tito may have.
So the vignettes that are so famously associated with Razor Ramon were shot on South Beach. But some of these skits you've actually seen and you believe were shot in Connecticut, right?
Yeah, a few of them were shot in Connecticut. In particular, the one in the Cuban restaurant,
right,
was actually Tacos Guadalajara on Summer Street. I think it was Summer Street or Main Street in Stamford, downtown Stamford, Connecticut, with John Villagomez or whatever the hell his name was. I know his name was John. He was the waiter in it, and that was one of our favorite Mexican restaurants. But the Cuban restaurant was shot right there in Stamford, Connecticut, and a couple of them on the street were shot in downtown Stamford, in the barrio, the mean streets of Stamford, Connecticut.
Which is kind of fun because when we watched these vignettes together last year, you were pointing out landmarks and people in the shot But for years and years, I think most of us, myself included, assumed that all of these were shot in Miami, and that was not the case. And this is an era where the vignettes were really a big deal to introduce the character. And I thought they really set a good tone, and he eventually makes his television debut on August 8th. This is during a Superstars airing, and he defeated Paul Van Dow. And fast forward a little bit, and you would see the September 14th edition of Primetime Wrestling. This is when Bruce is back with the company, and Razor is involved in his first major angle. And this is during a match where Randy Savage is defending the WWF title against Ric Flair, and Razor comes down and kicks Savage in the leg, rolls him into the ring, and then Flair ends up beating Savage and using the figure four in the process to win the world title. And I believe this is the famous match that had a little bit of controversy with Vince McMahon, Randy Savage, and Ric Flair. What can you tell us about this?
This is my first night back, Hershey, Pennsylvania. They had the big match, Randy and Flair. They're going to switch the title and what have you. And Razor's going to start his program with Randy Savage and kind of move Razor off there. Vince is back at the gorilla position watching this damn thing, and he hates it. Absolutely hated the finish. He felt that Flair wasn't aggressive enough. He felt that Randy just died in the finish and didn't fight enough. And as you said, he sent Bobby Heenan out and told the guys to go out and restart the match, sent him out to restart the friggin' match, and had Razor go back out and do it, but got Randy fired up. And still, in Vince's opinion, Randy wasn't fighting back enough and felt that Randy was just dying out there. So Vince sends my happy ass out there first night back and tells me, tell Randy to fight, damn it. So I go out and I try to grab Randy and tell him to fight. And Vince said, fight back. And Randy knocks me on his ass. And I come back to the backstage area where Vince would say the biggest pop of the night was me getting knocked on my ass. But that was just backstage from all the boys and the crew. But Vince was furious. He felt that it wasn't anything on Razor. It was more on Randy and Flair. Felt that they just were kind of going through the motions and didn't give him what he wanted. And he was pretty damn livid. But they went out and redid it and got Randy to fight back a little bit.
Let me ask you this. You were there. You saw the match. And the match is available on the WWE Network if you'd like to check it out. But catch me up. In your opinion, was the match that bad, or is Vince just overreacting? Is this one of those Vince-isms where he sees something we don't see?
It was that bad. You didn't see the match that they redid. You saw the edited version of the the first part of the match and then the redone match. But it was, and when you take a guy like Randy Savage, who was a superstar and a WWF champion, he wanted him to be a big star and to fight and to be competitive. And he felt that Randy had gone out there to do a job and that Randy was just kind of going through the motions and that the two guys were dancing versus competing.
Is this a boo-boo face situation? In your opinion?
Yeah, it could have been. It really could have been. I think that it was, in my opinion, yeah, I think it was a little bit of a boo-boo face. And okay, well, they're, whenever they need me, they put the title back on me. But now, they put it on me. Now they're taking it off of me. And I'm going to put the new guy over, that being Razor. And I think it was a little boo-boo face. But it sure as hell, once he had to go back out there, he being Randy, had to go back out and redo it. He did it right.
Let me ask you this. Do you think this is the beginning of McMahon starting to lose confidence in Savage's in-ring ability? Because it wouldn't be too long after this that Savage would, not be pleased just being an announcer and leave for the greener pastures of WCW.
I think it may have been the first time that I recall during my time that Randy ever kind of exhibited a little bit of boo-boo face attitude and kind of woe is me and okay, well, You want me to do the job? I'll go do the job. Randy always went out, and if he was doing the job or if he was going over, he wanted to steal the show. If he was going to be the man and put in that position, he wanted to steal the show.
I'm with you on that. I'm asking, do you think this is the beginning of McMahon losing confidence in him as an in-ring performer? Not what Randy felt that night, but what Vince thought. Is this,
I think it was, because I think it was the first time Vince experienced it from Randy.
Sure. Now, you said something a minute ago when you said, I'm going to put over the new guy. I was going to talk about how remarkable it was that, really think about the level of confidence that Vince McMahon and the WWF must have in a guy like Razor Ramon, a debuting character, for them to put him with one of the biggest stars in the history of the business, Randy Savage, as the first major program. It's quite a compliment to Razor, but you kind of indicated that maybe it wasn't exactly what Macho Man was looking for. Do you ever have a conversation with Macho Man about the way he felt about working with the new guy?
Oh yeah, definitely. Randy in the beginning was going to make Razor work for everything that he got. And he wasn't, happy about having to go in. He won the title, he dropped the title, won the title, and Randy felt that he was just being put out to pasture, especially at this time in his career.
I was hoping for an impression there. Maybe I'll do a better job teeing it up next time. We get to Survivor Series 92, and this is where Savage and Warrior, then billed as the Ultimate Maniacs, we haven't spent a lot of time talking about them here on the show, were scheduled to take on Ric Flair and Razor Ramon. But of course, a few weeks prior to the event, Warrior winds up fired from the WWF. It feels like I say that almost every week now. So Mr. Perfect, who was Flair's executive consultant, is suddenly turned babyface and now teamed with Savage to take on Flair and Razor at the Survivor Series. We talked all about this Mr. Perfect situation in our Mr. Perfect episode, which is available in the archives. But let's talk about the decision here briefly to turn Mr. Perfect babyface, because for his entire career up to this point, Kurt had been a heel. What can you tell us about the way he felt? Because it's one of those deals where the Mr. Perfect character, even in name, is supposed to be a heel. And now he's a babyface. Were people just that confident in his ability to pull this off? Or was it simply a matter of, we need a main eventer and we don't have one? Oh, here's a guy. Let's try to make a deal.
The stronger the heel, the stronger the babyface, and vice versa. Mr. Perfect was over extremely huge as a heel. And we felt that by taking a heel that strong and turning him babyface, that they would be able to fit in that babyface role. We didn't have anybody else of that top level to replace Ultimate Warrior. So we had to do something drastic. And looking around and looking at the roster at that point in time, really the best decision was when you look at it, what did you have? You needed something new. You needed something different. Perfect fit that bill. So we tried it.
So the match goes down on November 25th, 1992 in Richfield Coliseum. It feels like a lot of Survivor Series happened there over the years. The match goes about 16 and a half minutes, and Savage and Perfect get the win by DQ. Meltzer gave it 3.25 stars. He noted, this was a lot of, silly DQs here on pay-per-view in a row. He wrote that Ramon wrestled like Scott Hall once again, and that Savage was working most of the match, taking the punishment. Perfect showed a little bit of ring rust, which is to be expected, especially since he only had kind of 2 weeks notice here. And he wrote, Flair was really up, but he wasn't good enough to carry the other three while doing the one-man show. The finish was one tired cliche after another, ref bumps, and then double teaming for a DQ. What did you think of this match? You were there for this. I'm sure at some point we'll talk about Survivor Series 1992 in long form. We're coming up on the 25-year anniversary, so we may actually try to hit that in November. But what do you remember about this match and this kind of being Razor's first test on the big stage?
I thought it sucked. I thought it sucked because Kurt, and it's not really his fault. He didn't have a whole lot of time to prepare. But he came in really out of shape, got winded early in the match, and just did not have the gas to go. And the match suffered from it. And it came down to pretty much, get the heat on me, brother. Just beat me up, beat me down. I'll make the hot tag.
Let's talk about what he's doing after, because after this Survivor Series, Razor is working house shows mostly against Undertaker and Big Boss Man. He's losing to Taker on all of them and defeating Boss Man on all of them. Do you have any early stories you can share with us about being on the road with Razor Ramon? Because this is probably his most difficult schedule that he had worked at that time. You guys are still doing a pretty brutal house show run.
We are, and Razor was a new character, and people were accepting him as a heel. So it was an absolute natural to be able to put him out there with guys like Boss Man and Undertaker, and they accepted him. But sumbitch was getting over huge, and Vince, especially at this point, was looking at Razor as possibly down the road to be a WWF champion, and thinking, God, I could see that guy with the big belt.
Well, it's funny you say that, because December 92, it was announced that Razor would be challenging Bret at the Royal Rumble for the world title. And it was originally supposed to be Bret against the Ultimate Warrior at the Royal Rumble, in which Bret has said before that he was supposed to defeat the Warrior clean in the middle with a sharpshooter. Who was such a fan of Scott Hall? Is it just right time, right place? How does he get the good fortune of being in the main event spot on his very first 2 pay-per-views?
He was new. He was good. Vince liked him. I mean, he liked the character. We needed something new at the time.
What was it about Razor that Vince was so high on that Vince liked?
New, and he loved the look. He loved the character. He liked the accent. He liked the way that he worked. His shit was solid. And he was able to get in there. Big guy. He had the look, and Vince was looking for something new. He wanted to push new and move on.
He starts the year off on January 10th on an edition of WWF Mania, where we've got Raymond Rougeau conducting a sit-down interview in the locker room with Owen Hart, when suddenly Razor attacks Owen, and that helps kind of jumpstart the feud and kick it into high gear for the pay-per-view. On the January 25th edition of The Observer, it's reported that Razor blew out his knee, but was still going to compete against Bret at the Royal Rumble. Was there any sort of consideration that he may actually wind up having to miss this show because of this knee injury, or what was the thinking at the time?
Terrified. We had this whole thing. We were just so damn snake bit at this time between the Warrior and the Bulldog, and now Razor getting hurt. It seemed like everything that we did, Flair at the time had his vertigo issues. Everybody was coming up lame, and the fear was, okay, we built up Razor now, we're getting to Royal Rumble. There was definitely a fear that he was not going to be able to compete, and I think on Razor's mind, he wasn't about to let that opportunity just kind of go by the wayside. He felt that he could make it and do it. Tape it up and go.
It goes down January 24th at the Arco Arena in Sacramento. The Observer would give it 3.25 stars. They go nearly 18 minutes before Bret gets the win with the sharpshooter. Meltzer would write it was a very good match, but it was hurt live because they brought curtains out that Luger was hiding behind right down as the match started, and the crowd was more into the curtains than they were the first half of the match. Do you remember that being a miscue?
I remember people being interested in looking for the live crowd, trying to see what the hell was going on back there, but there was no way to get around it. I thought that the match was excellent, especially considering the fact that Razor was hurt. And that's a testament to Bret Hart being able to work around the match, but it's also a testament to Razor to be able to go out there and work around an injury and to do the things that he did and to sell that injury and sell that throughout the match and tell a story around it that made sense.
That's exactly almost word for word what Dave wrote. And he said the match was done in a way to not require a lot of movement from Ramon, but Hart carried it well. Considering it was a world title match on pay-per-view, the crowd was pretty dead live, but Hart did a great job. At one point, Hart did a dive through the ropes, and it looked like Ramon's knee was injured, but he seemed okay. Hart did a lot of moves for near falls and then got on the sharpshooter, but Ramon made the ropes. Finally, after a few more moves, Hart got the sharpshooter on in the middle for a submission win. And he noted that, Hart was working on Ramon's injured knee the entire time. So Ramon's limping made sense. This was not only Razor's first shot at the WWF title, but his first singles match on pay-per-view. So this is a big test, because in the prior match, he's in there with Randy Savage. He's in there with Mr. Perfect. He's in there with Ric Flair. So you're in there with three of the greatest of all time. So it's easy to kind of hide things that maybe you're not awesome at in a tag match. But here, one-on-one, you could be exposed. But this was a pretty good match. So what was the reaction from Vince McMahon and everybody else afterwards?
All the way around for both guys, off the chart great, because you got Brett, who went out and proved that as a champion, as a babyface champion, that he could lead somebody and take somebody that we really weren't all that sure about, had a lot of confidence in, had a lot of high hopes for in Razor. And also on Razor's part, being able to go out and work through an injury and have a great match with Brett and make it all believable and hang in there.
In late March, just to make sure he's ready for WrestleMania, they put him in tag matches with Lex Luger against Bret Hart and Mr. Perfect. And then, of course, WrestleMania 9 goes down on April 4th, 1993 in Las Vegas. We've got that show available for you in our archives. Razor gets a win over Bob Backlund there. It only goes 3 minutes and 45 seconds. Razor wins with an inside cradle. And it's probably the first pinfall loss that Backlund had ever done in the WWF. And that goes back to like 77. But Meltzer thought it was the shits, and he gave it a negative star. He wrote it was terrible. Briefly, I know we talked about it on the other episode. What did you think of WrestleMania 9 and Razor Bob Backlund?
Well, unfortunately, I had to witness it, and it was not good. So, believe it or not, I would have to agree with your buddy Meltzer on this one. It was not good on any level. Even the roll up was just god awful. And you watch Razor, kind of a bit of disgust on his face on the match. They just didn't gel.
Do you think that some of that is because Razor's hurt, or is Bob sandbagging him?
They just, the styles, it was oil and water. They just didn't gel. There's some guys that, man, you just, different styles, they can't work together, and you try everything, but they don't gel. And I think that was more of anything.
Let's get to May 17th, though. This is the May 17th, 1993 edition of Raw that many people remember. It's where the Kid defeats Razor Ramon. The Observer the next week had this to say: Sean Waltman, this time simply wrestling as the Kid, scored the first jobber upset in WWF history by pinning Razor Ramon. It was set up as the typical squash, with Kid selling every move big, and after Ramon missed a move, Kid did a moonsault body block off the top rope for the pin. Waltman, who has worked as the Kamikaze Kid and Cannonball Kid on 2 previous shows doing total squash jobs for Doink the Clown and Mr. Hughes, got no offense in again before his pinning move. Scott said that Vince came to him and said they have to turn him babyface because the crowd kept getting behind him. However, Vince didn't want to do that the traditional way of turning a heel babyface by coming down and making a save for someone. He wanted Razor to put the Kid over and have other heels make comments about Razor because of it. Like, speaking of loser, what about Razor Ramon? And Vince felt that work would turn Razor babyface, which eventually did. Scott said he knew this was going to happen about 6 months prior, but he was told by Vince not to tell anyone. And after the match, Scott said that some of the boys came to him and asked him if he failed a piss test or was in trouble because they thought him putting the Kid over was some sort of punishment. What are your memories? Obviously a very iconic moment in the early days of Raw. People still talk about this one all these years later.
It definitely was, but it sure as hell wasn't planned 6 months in advance. Razor was getting a babyface reaction. Big, good-looking guy, tough guy, and the crowd was really drawn to him. He had natural charisma, and he was oozing machismo, man. So the crowd was getting behind him. They liked the son of a bitch. So you kind of want to feed into that, but at the same time you don't. At the same time, we had brought in Sean Waltman. We didn't know what to do with Sean. I had worked with Sean in the Global Wrestling Federation prior to that during my hiatus from the WWF. And we brought Sean in. Vince took one look at him and was like, what in the hell are we supposed to do with this? We brought him out to the Manhattan Center on Monday Night Raw, and the crowd knew who he was, which, thank God. But they were chanting Lightning Kid, Lightning Kid. Vince didn't want to use the name Lightning Kid. He looked like a kid, so Vince wanted to keep the kid thing. So each week we changed Waltman's name from like Cannonball Kid, Kamikaze Kid. I think at first he was the Kamikaze Kid, but each week it would change until something would stick. And the idea was that eventually we would get, after it was 3 or 4 weeks, that we would get to the Razor match, and Razor would just beat the dog shit out of him, and the kid would catch a quick fall on Razor. What we did not expect, did not plan, and it's one of those beautiful moments in wrestling, was after Kid beat Razor, and Razor stood in the ring, was like, holding up 2 fingers, like, what the hell? And the crowd started chanting 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. And Vince was like, he's the 1, 2, 3 kid, pal. God damn it, we've got something there. But I got to tell you, man, Sean Waltman coming in that Manhattan crowd in the Manhattan Center, they knew him and they loved him, and it was the right place, right environment to do that whole thing with Razor and the kid.
Why didn't Vince like Lightning Kid?
It wasn't his.
Oh, okay. There you go. That's what I was hoping you would say, but I didn't think you really would. Well, if you want to go check that clip out, guys, this is pretty fun. Make this a companion piece for yourself. Make a note. May 17th, 1993. What a fun Raw that was. The next time we would see Razor would be on Raw, May 31st, 1993. He would defeat Tony Roy. On June 12th, Razor would defeat Bert Centino on Superstars. And we cruise on over to the King of the Ring pay-per-view. This goes down on June 13th, 1993 in Dayton, Ohio. And in the first round, he takes on Bret Hart. Bret would get the victory in about 10.5 minutes. And Meltzer liked it, thought it was a good start, and gave the match 3 stars. What'd you think of Razor and Bret at King of the Ring 93?
I thought it was a great start. It was probably, well, it wasn't probably, but it was a better match than what they had at the Royal Rumble, because obviously Razor was healthy, but it put Razor in the game and showed that he could continue to go and that he was definitely a player in this. And we were going with Bret, on a different plane. Bret had lost the championship, but he wanted to make Bret King of the Ring.
And he does. I'm sure we'll talk about King of the Ring 93 in long form another time. But what we're really interested in is the June 21st edition of Raw. This is where we finally get the Razor Kid rematch. Meltzer would write that Kid was allowed more offense and the match had a good story. Ramon finally got the advantage and was destroying Kid and went for the Razor's edge on the floor, but Kid reversed it. Kid went off the top rope and apparently was going to do a spectacular tope. I've seen him do that move at least a dozen times and come off the top so many times it isn't funny, but wouldn't you know it, the first time on national TV, he slipped and fell off. Everyone involved were great in covering up what apparently was supposed to be the finish being missed, and instead they went into the ring, did a moonsault block, grabbed the bag of money, and sprinted out of the building with Ramon on his tail into an awaiting car, and he sped off into the night. Pretty sure he was supposed to grab the bag after doing the tope originally, but they covered it up so well that it really didn't matter. He may have hurt his knee because he was sprinting very slowly away, and Ramon had to try very hard to not catch him. That show actually got a 3.1 rating, and that was the main event of the show. It was the fourth highest rated cable program of the week. And it was probably the best finish of a weekly wrestling show in the ratings in over a year. So hugely successful angle here. And it told a great story. What did you think of the match? What was supposed to happen? What really happened?
I loved the match, but Kid knocked himself out. Kid slipped on the top rope and was knocked out just flat ass cold. Had no idea where the hell he was. And Scott Hall went over, picked him up, told him to do it again, grab the money, and go. And that's exactly what they did. And it's a testament to everybody involved being excellent professionals and being able to improvise on the spot. They knew all we needed was Kid grabbing that money and getting the hell out of Dodge. And they were able to get to that. But the reason Kid was limping and the reason there was all off was because he was just knocked stone cold and had absolutely no idea where the hell he was.
All right, let's fast forward into the summer. Here's where we would see Razor working with Mr. Hughes in a dark match on Raw and then getting some wins on enhancement talents for Raw and Superstars. But fast forward towards August 22nd, 1993, and here's where we see Razor cost DiBiase a match against the Kid, and that sets up their SummerSlam match. The July 26th edition of The Observer reports the original plan was for Money Inc., DiBiase and IRS to take on Razor and the 1-2-3 Kid, but obviously that's not what wound up happening. Any memories of that being the original plan, and what changed? The rumor and innuendo is that DiBiase comes in and has a sit down with Vince and has a heartfelt, hey, I got to get off the road. I got to get out of here. And they call an audible. What really happened?
Well, originally, the plan was for Razor to make the babyface turn and go one-on-one with DiBiase. And the way to get there was with the 1-2-3 Kid. And then we thought, okay, we make Razor and Kid a team against Money Inc. And you kind of split each of those guys off. And it was during this time that DiBiase was having some hard times at home, and Ted just was completely fried, and his wife was unhappy with him being on the road and his extracurricular activities, and Ted needed to go home and pretty much save his marriage and save his life, and wanted to go. He needed to get off the road, and he needed to move on.
You can hear more about that on our Ted DiBiase $1 Million Man episode, available now in the archives. August 30th is when we see DiBiase go down in his final WWF match. It's actually his last match in North America. You can catch that, of course, in our archives. They go about 7.5 minutes. Ultimately, Ramon gets the pin after the Razor's Edge. Meltzer gave it a 1.5 stars. After the way DiBiase came into the company, this is disappointing that it goes out in this way. Obviously, Razor was over, and it was a good character, but it just felt like this was kind of rushed, and I would have liked to have seen him go out in a more meaningful way, but I guess the circumstances didn't really allow that, right?
I think everybody would have loved to have seen Ted go out. Actually, nobody wanted to see Ted go out at all, but I think that it was the right thing for Ted to do in his personal life. Injuries, his personal life at home, everything combined. It sucks, but that's the way that the cookie crumbles sometimes.
As we cruise on into October, we see Razor and Rick Martel as the final two men in a 20-man battle royal on Raw. The stipulation for this match is that those two guys who finished last, who are the last men standing, would then wrestle the following week on Raw for the vacant IC title, because Shawn Michaels had suddenly quit the WWF. I'm sure we're going to talk about that at some point in long form, but hit us with the quick and dirty. Why did Shawn quit here?
Shawn was upset over a drug test that a fine that Vince had levied against him, and Shawn wasn't going to pay the fine and felt that it was unfair and felt that he didn't fail the test. And I believe that the comment was, well, you sit in your ivory tower counting your millions. I'll sit home in San Antonio, and if you want this belt, you can come to San Antonio and get it.
I know you don't want to talk about specifics for what he failed for, but how much was the fine that he refused to pay?
Actually, I don't really remember. It was a pot fine, I'm pretty sure. It wasn't
$5,000?
It wasn't a hefty fine. I think Shawn's more... It wasn't the fine.
It was the principle
amount of the fine. It was the principle that Shawn didn't feel that he failed the test. So it was more of the principle of things, and I don't think it was ever about the amount. I just think it was, fuck you, I didn't fail, and I'm not going to pay your silly fine. And if you want this title, I'm going to stay home in San Antonio, and you can come and get it. I remember the ivory towers, sit in your ivory tower and count your millions. I remember that line as well.
Not going to freestyle a guess on the fine.
If it was first time, I guess it would have been like $1,000.
So he's going to sit at home and miss all these paydays for all the shows. Over $1,000 in principal.
He did.
And Vince was okay with that. Well, what changed in their relationship to where Vince was able to kind of deal with him? I know everybody, and Sean gets a bad rap, and we certainly address that here on the show, but it feels like sometimes you have to just handle different people different ways. And eventually Vince figured out how to handle Sean a little differently. When did that come about, in your opinion?
Time frame wise would be right after Sean came back. He had the match with Razor, which I'm sure we're gonna talk about here at WrestleMania, and kind of stole the show with the ladder match. And Vince started seeing Sean for the performer and really started to appreciate Sean much more. He didn't really get to that point until he saw the babyface in Shawn Michaels. But at this time, he was happy to say, you know what, Sean, stay at home. But Vince is a funny guy. I mean, it depends. It depends on what day it is and what he had to eat that day. And truthfully, you're going to laugh at this, as to whether or not he ate before he made that decision. So it's subjective.
Whether or not he ate?
Okay, Conrad, there was a period where I had to have a writer's assistant at television that was on a schedule that they had to have food to Vince wherever the hell he was in the building at certain times, because he gets cranky when he doesn't eat. So everybody, all of us, we all carried protein bars with us, so in case he got hungry and there wasn't any food, here, Vince, have a protein bar. But there were times, and there were production and writers' assistants that had to have food at such and such a time. And I don't give a shit where Vince was, what he was doing. I said, bring him his goddamn food. It made for a happier Vince. It made for a much easier day at television or wherever the hell we were. Feed the man.
You're being serious.
100% serious.
This is amazing. Is this after Sean had allegedly inherited all that cash?
I think so. It's in the same time frame. I think so.
Well, I'm just asking because if a guy's willing to say, nope, I'm just sitting home on principle, that guy probably doesn't have a lot of money problems, because there's a lot of things that people listening to this podcast and two people recording this podcast on general principle would say, nope, I'm not coming to work. I don't like this. But those gimmicks come every month, and we just suck it up and go to work.
Yeah, we do. And I think that this is about the right time frame, and he was able to do it.
You know, before the suspension happened, or the quitting, or I don't know, whatever the impasse with Sean is, before that goes down, Sean and Razor were working house shows for the IC title. Was the plan supposed to be Sean put over Razor for the belt, but Sean, just didn't make it that time?
No, because if anything, we were planning on doing it. And I don't even remember the time frame, but it sure as hell wasn't then. It kind of fucked everything up. I want to say that we planned on doing it, getting to WrestleMania, trying to extend it all that time. But it wasn't something that was imminent at all. It screwed up plans.
Well, let's talk about the Survivor Series, which is November 24th, 93. And here he teams with Randy Savage, the 1-2-3 Kid, and Marty Jannetty to take on IRS, Diesel, Rick Martel, and Adam Bomb. Not a great match, not an awful match. Feels like just a hodgepodge of guys here. 2 3/4 stars is what Dave thought. What did you think of this match on Survivor Series 1993?
I think that hodgepodge probably describes it best, because it was a lot of guys with individual issues that we didn't have anything for, and had to put them in a match and looking for star power. And that's exactly what it was. It was filling up time on a pay-per-view card, and we got through it, and thank God, kind of move on.
We would see Razor work with Diesel on a lot of house shows from here. On TV, he only gets one victory over Diesel, and that's by DQ on November 29th. Most of his other matches are against enhancement talent. The only one of note, just because we've talked about him a lot, I guess, is January 16th of 1994 on Wrestling Challenge. He went over Mike Bell, and we've talked about him a lot here on the show. And through January, he starts working house shows again with Shawn Michaels. So Shawn's back in the fold. How did you guys talk Shawn into coming back? Who makes the call? What's that situation like with Shawn and his return?
Pat was making a lot of calls, and Vince was making a lot of calls, and they finally, agreed to disagree, and Shawn agreed to come back. And a lot of it was due to Pat and I just really pushing for the fact that Shawn never lost the Intercontinental Championship. So we have a guy that has a claim to the Intercontinental Championship, having never lost it. And you've got Razor, who is the champion and on TV right now. So we had this idea that, God, can we just, everybody agreed to disagree, and can't we all just get along and bring Shawn back and do this I'm the champion, no, I'm the champion issue to get to WrestleMania, where eventually that was where we kind of always wanted to end up, just to have the blow-off for their match way back when. So finally, Vince, whatever agreement they came up with, I have no idea, but Pat and I were happy that we finally got to play out our angle of champion versus champion.
Well, on the way there, you guys first do a ladder match on January 14th in San Jose. This is the first Razor-Shawn ladder match. Razor wins and retains the title, and they wrestle a ladder match 2 days later in Richfield, Ohio. So they're starting to kind of work the bugs out. Who is the first guy to think of, hey, we need to have this thing be a ladder match? Do you remember who pitched that? I know over the years, Brett has said that he and Shawn were the first to do it, and he felt like he, had his contribution kind of whitewashed by the WWE, because the Razor-Shawn ladder match at WrestleMania is the one that's considered the gold standard in the WWE.
The ladder match 100% was Bret Hart's idea, and Bret and Shawn did have the first ladder match, and it was a classic. It was excellent. It's for the Intercontinental Championship, and we did it in a house show. It had never been done on pay-per-view at this point. So Pat had seen it. Pat loved the idea of the ladder match. The fact that we had 2 title belts and 2 guys laying claim to the championship was how we got to the ladder match. Let's go ahead and put the two championship belts high above the ring. Whoever gets them, they will be the rightful Intercontinental Champion. So it was just a kind of a logical conclusion to deciding these 2 guys laying claim. They each had their own belt. Whoever ends up with both belts at the end of the ladder match is going to be the true champion. So yes, we stole Bret's idea to use it for a match at WrestleMania, but good God, man, it became Shawn's signature there for a long time.
Let's talk about Royal Rumble 94. We've covered this before in our archives, but Razor takes on IRS here. It's January 22nd. It goes down in Providence, Rhode Island. The match only gets a 1.5 stars. What did you think of the match? This is kind of a weird match. Shawn Michaels is out. There is some interference. Briefly tell us what you remember about this kind of screwy finish and Royal Rumble 94.
Well, the whole idea behind the match was to get to Shawn and Razor at WrestleMania. So and I believe this may have been one of the first times that we saw Shawn back, but it was Shawn getting involved and trying to cost Razor his claim to the Intercontinental Championship. The whole design of the match was just to get to WrestleMania and get us to that point of Shawn and Razor in the ladder match. So we weren't looking for a 5-star, 6.5-star Tokyo Dome match between Razor and IRS. We were looking at a match to be able to get Shawn Michaels involved and to kind of take us to WrestleMania with those two with their issue.
That's available in the archives. It feels kind of weird to spend a lot of time on it. It does feel a little out of place that IRS is here, but of course he's essentially the backdrop to build towards the Shawn Michaels match at WrestleMania. And Razor would continue to work with Shawn on all the house shows in January and February. He's working on TV and going over in all of them. Reno Riggins, the Black Phantom. He teams with 1-2-3 Kid to get a win over the Quebecers. He beats the Brooklyn Brawler. Just very basic, enhancement matches that we saw consistently from 93, 94. And the concept here again is we're trying to build towards WrestleMania 10. Shawn was never beaten for his IC title, so he claims he's the real champ. Razor claims he's the real champ. So we've got 2 IC belts here on the line. And the match goes down on March 20th, 1994 from Madison Square Garden. I know we're going to cover WrestleMania 10 at some point, and I'm looking forward to it, but what was the thinking at the time behind WrestleMania 10 and bringing it back to Madison Square Garden? Just the anniversary aspect, or to celebrate kind of the history of the WWE, or what was Vince's motive for making this a really big event and doing it in New York City?
10-year anniversary and make it huge. And this was also the debut of the very first Fan Fest that we had at this WrestleMania as well, or Fan Access, I guess they call it now. But it was all about the anniversary and the 10-year anniversary and bringing it home to the Garden.
What did the boys or Pat Patterson, or what was the thinking from everybody about doing a ladder match on a big stage like this at WrestleMania 10? Was there any sort of old school thinking that that's bullshit and you don't need that and this isn't what we do and that's not our business? And it feels like something that some of the old timers, maybe agents and such, would have pushed back on. Do you remember any of that?
No, not at all, because they had an opportunity to see it in the house shows, and they knew that it was an exciting and it was a different match. It was a way to be able to get guys over without having to beat them 1, 2, 3. So you go back to the old days of Bruno Sammartino and the original Sheik, and why they had to develop the old cage and the escape of the cage was so that the babyface didn't have to do a clean job in the middle of the ring, 1, 2, 3. It was another outlet to have a match and to get a winner and have an exciting, different match. So people had seen it, they liked the concept, and they knew that Razor and Shawn could deliver in the match aspect of it.
The match was outstanding. A lot of people, still think this is one of the best WrestleMania matches of all time. Would you rank this, in the top 5 best WrestleMania matches ever?
I'd have to go back, yes, without a doubt, because it set a precedent. There were 2 things about this whole night that kind of stick in my head whenever I think of this match. I always have to think about the match with the Quebecers that was earlier in the night. And the guys went almost 12 minutes heavy. So starting out the night, I was working the gorilla position, and I was trying to play catch up all night long. And I kind of blew a gasket. But I blew a gasket on Jacques Rougeau. He was the one that got the wrath of my fury that night. And he kept coming back to me all night long, trying to argue with me about that he didn't go over time, and he argued with me for days and weeks about that he didn't go over his time. But then we get to the ladder match, and Shawn and Razor are out there, and they are tearing the house down. I'm already really heavy in the night for the show, and the ladder match is going heavy. But it's hard to take time out of the ladder match and take away a lot of the drama that they needed to make that match the great match that it truly was. So, yes, it would be in my top 10 all-time great WrestleMania matches. It would probably be my number one all-time ladder match, though. The best ladder match ever.
It goes 18 minutes and 47 seconds. Just a phenomenal match. If you haven't watched this, you really need to stop the podcast and just go watch it right now. It's a 5-star match. One of the first ones that Dave ever gave a WWF match. Maybe the first. I don't really recall. But it won every award you could possibly win. Pro Wrestling Illustrated gave it the match of the year. And it was also named by the WWE on their website, WWE.com, one of the best matches in WrestleMania history. I think it was number 5. So it's a pretty big deal. And it really, I think this match kind of made both guys and leveled them up. Would you agree?
Wholeheartedly. And it made both guys, and it also made that ladder match. It made the ladder match a go-to, kind of like the Hell in the Cell.
It's funny because Meltzer was pretty prophetic with the way he ended his write-up about the match. He says, if you haven't seen this match, make sure you do so, as it'll be remembered for many years. Watch how ladder matches now become the hottest gimmick on the indie scene. Boy, he nailed that. You guys were old.
Unfortunately, they did.
And you guys were the innovators here. And so often, people think that the cool stuff happens on the indies and then the WWE rips it off. But this is something that maybe a few years prior, the WWF, this just wouldn't have been possible. Can you imagine? Let's just rewind for a minute. Can you imagine, like, if the Ultimate Warrior and Hulk Hogan's world title match was a ladder match?
Oh, God. No, I couldn't. I couldn't imagine either one of them getting past the second rung.
Our great friend Ric Flair has jokingly said that this match is the time that Shawn Michaels had a 5-star match with a ladder. Because, and of course, I don't think he says that disparaging Scott Hall. I know a lot of people will debate that, but I think the point he's trying to get across is, sometimes when you lose, you still get way, way, way more over. And I feel like here, Shawn, even though he lost, Shawn's the real star coming out of this match, at least to me.
Oh my God, yes. And the credit, again, give credit where credit is due. Bret Hart, his idea, his concept, he laid out the very first ladder match ever, and he made it viable, what it is today. And I want to tell a side story of the greatest ladder match of all time. And I say that because Jim Cornette was working for us at the time, and Cornette was trying to tell us about the greatest ladder match ever, which had Chris Candido against Tracy Smothers. Love Tracy to death, love Chris, rest his soul. They had this match in like Beckley, West Virginia. I don't know where it was. It was in Smoking Mountain Wrestling. I'm probably going to catch shit from Cornette all about this in Detroit, but he was telling us, goddamn, watch this match. It's the greatest match ever. The psychology, it's wonderful. It's great. It's all these things. Well, they had 2 rods or poles sticking up on opposite corners of the ring. And they had a cable tied between the 2 poles. And there was a $5,000 check suspended in the middle of that rope or that wire, whatever it is. And the ladder match between Tracy and Chris was to get up and get that $5,000 check. There's one problem. Match, the poles kind of bowed inward so that the rope sagged and the check was dangling down into the middle of the ring. Now, Chris Candido is not 6 feet tall. And they were doing crisscrosses in the middle of the ring where they were actually ducking underneath the check to do their spots. And the check was low enough that Candido could just reach up, and it was at his forehead, and take the check down. But they still worked to the ladder to get the check that was roughly 5 feet off the ground. And Corny's going, look at the goddamn psychology, and they're working, and they're having a match. I'm like, Corny, there's 2 things about this match. First of all, why don't they just grab the check? Because it's a goddamn ladder match. You gotta get the psychology of the ladder match. Okay, fine. Maybe I can buy that, but not really. But second of all, why only $5,000? Goddamn Beckley, West Virginia, that's a lot of goddamn money. $5,000, motherfucker. I'll kill you. You know how many goddamn double cheeseburgers you can buy at $5,000 motherfucking dollars? And to this day, he will probably argue that was the greatest ladder match in the history of ladder matches.
Oh gosh, I didn't think.
Motherfucker.
Thank you. I like when I start talking and you finish that over me. So anything else we want to talk about? WrestleMania 10, the ladder match, the greatest of all time.
The greatest ladder match of all time, Shawn Michaels versus Razor Ramon, man, double titles. Absolutely. Agree 100%.
I've always been fascinated by when Shawn goes home, takes his belt with him. Do you guys already have another from Reggie Parks lying in wait, or do y'all have to call Reggie with the panic button and say, get us another belt fast?
Well, think back, my dear friend. We had multiple Intercontinental Championships due to our friend, the Ultimate Warrior. So we had a few at the office. So we had one ready to go. We always had backup belt, usually.
Usually.
Because, you go to Belts R Us.
So through April, we see Razor continue to get wins on TV. And here, he's beating some bigger guys. He beats Adam Bomb on April 23rd. He beats Jeff Jarrett by DQ on April 25th. But then Diesel defeats him on Superstars to win the Intercontinental title. That goes down on April 30th. What was the decision? What was the thinking here? You have this spectacular match where he beats Shawn Michaels, and then, a month and change later, Diesel beats him for the IC title. Why was it time to shift gears here?
God damn it, pal, it sweeps. And look at him. He's huge. And he makes that fist with his gloved hand, and good God, look at him. He's monstrous.
All right, let's take a timeout right here, Bruce. I want to tell everybody about Andrew and his crew over at GoPro Wrestling. They're going to be live at our show this Sunday in New York City as our very special guests. Of course, they're not going to be filming the events. You've got to come see us in person and get your tickets at boxofgimmicks.com. But what they are doing is bringing some swag on Sunday to give away some free figures and other wrestling merchandise absolutely free to random people at the show. It could be you. And I also want to mention that you're probably going to see an interview with either Bruce or I on that GoPro Wrestling channel. Just subscribe to their channel now and support Andrew. His channel is a friend of the show. They've been listening since the very first episode, and Andrew often helps us with our research here. Go subscribe to the GoPro Wrestling YouTube channel at youtube.com/GoPro Wrestling. I'm telling you, you're going to love it. They've got stuff from Shane Douglas, Honky Tonk Man, and over 20 new interviews that are going to be released in the coming weeks. You do not want to miss it. I've even been tagged this past week in that uncomfortable interview with Billy Gunn. It's good stuff, man. And best of all, dude, it's all free. How do you beat free? Go to the GoPro Wrestling channel on YouTube. Just click that subscribe button, and anytime a new video drops, you're going to be notified. It's youtube.com/GoPro Wrestling. Chat me up about the backstage situation. At this point, are Shawn and Diesel and Razor, is everybody traveling together and cool, and has the clique already started to form here?
This was about the time that the clique was in full formation mode. They were all traveling together. I remember the Rio Rogers segment where Razor and Shawn Michaels were going back and forth when they both had belts. This was the lead up to WrestleMania. They had spent the entire 2 weeks before that taping session going over this promo and ending with Shawn blowing a bubble and Razor taking his toothpick out and, yo, sorry to burst your bubble, Chico. And they had this big finish, and it just was deader than Kelsey's nuts when it actually took place in front of a live crowd. But yeah, the clique was forming, man. They were all hanging out, riding together, and becoming very cliquish at this point.
So at this point, is there any problem, in Razor getting the win over Shawn at WrestleMania? Is there any problem with Diesel getting the win over Razor? Are these guys all tight enough where they're cool with losing it as long as it's to their buddy.
No, that was not an issue at all.
That's what I thought.
No, I mean, not even close.
Next up, we see Razor in a qualifying match with Quang. What's your favorite Quang match?
Wow, you know what? You picked it. It was the May 9th, 1994 match in a qualifying match for the King of the Ring. He just came up short against Razor Ramon.
We see on June 5th on Wrestling Challenge, here's a little bit of trivia for you. Razor Ramon defeat PJ Walker. Tell everybody who PJ Walker was.
Aldo Montoya, the Portuguese man of war.
There's, talk that he and Louis Spicoli were also in the clique, but they don't get talked about nearly as much as the other guys do. What was PJ Walker's relationship like with the clique, and how does he come to be a part of their group?
Well, during this time, PJ was an enhancement talent, and PJ's a great guy, just in general. And the guys, Razor liked him. Razor took a liking to him and kind of took him under his wing. Felt that, they could do more with him, which is one of the reasons that we did the whole Aldo Montoya thing once we found out that he spoke Portuguese. That just,
God damn, he speaks Portuguese. We need the Portuguese market.
he was part of it. Spicoli was never really a part of the clique at all. He just was kind of Louis, and Louis, had his issues with drugs, and if anything, he was somebody that they just kind of laughed at. But Louis was never really a part of the clique, to my knowledge, ever.
And now let's go ahead and get to SummerSlam 94. It's the United Center in Chicago. We've talked about this silliness once upon a time, where The Undertaker was featured. You can check this out on our episode on The Undertaker. But in this match, we see Razor Ramon with Hall of Fame running back for the Chicago Bears, Walter Payton, in his corner. And he's challenging Diesel for the Intercontinental title. And Diesel is seconded by Shawn Michaels in his corner. Overall, the match got 2 3/4 stars. And it was a pretty interesting match because you've got Walter Payton as a local sports tie-in, because we're at the United Center. And he's maybe one of the greatest athletes in the history of the NFL. And then on the other side, you've got one of the greatest wrestlers of all time, Shawn Michaels, in the other corner. The match comes down to Shawn Michaels taking the IC belt and having a tug of war with Walter Payton over it. After Walter wins the tug of war, as Diesel holds Ramon, Michaels goes for the super kick, but Ramon ducks and Diesel catches it instead. And then Walter Payton tackles Shawn Michaels and Ramon scores the pin. Meltzer would write, the booking made up for the limits of the two men's ability. After the match, Payton and his son celebrated in the ring with Ramon while they got to tease the Michaels-Diesel breakup. What'd you think of the match? And I'm sure you've got some great Walter Payton stories. We haven't talked about him before on the show, and you've teased it, so let's hear it. What can you tell us about Walter Payton at SummerSlam?
Well, first of all, I thought that the match was excellent. And in using Walter Payton, not just, a big part of it was the Chicago market. Walter Payton walked on water in Chicago. He was one of the greatest bears of all time, but he was also a huge national star. Walter Payton, one of the greatest of all times in the NFL, Sweetness himself. We were doing a lot with Walter's charity at the time, and he did just a ton of promotion for us. The match, you look at the people involved in this match. You got Diesel, Kevin Nash, Scott Hall, Razor Ramon, Shawn Michaels. 3 guys who know the wrestling business pretty damn well. And then you got Walter Payton, who this is his very first time ever being around a wrestling match and being involved in a wrestling match. And one of the funniest things that happened is in the backstage area is they're going over the match and they're kind of laying out the match and they're going over it with the referee. Kevin Nash, Scott Hall, and Shawn Michaels are forgetting spots, and it's Walter Payton who is correcting them and telling them, no, that you stay down. You're going to pop up here. Okay, he's going to come around and hit you with this. And the guys are looking at him like, he's heard this match twice now, and he's correcting them. Because he just had that kind of a mind from playing football all those years, remembering plays, and just, he was a sharp, sharp guy, and he got it. He got it from the minute that he walked in, from his promos to laying out the match and correcting, Sean, Kevin, and Scott throughout this whole thing. And I thought it was superb, especially to take an outsider like Walter Payton, bring him into our world, and his performance was off the chart.
In November, Razor starts working house shows against Jeff Jarrett. What type of gimmick was Jeff Jarrett working at the time?
Spend my days working hard on the go, but the hands on the clock keep spinning too slow. I can't wait to be alone with my baby tonight.
The rumors and innuendo, the November 21st, 1994 edition of The Observer report that there's talk that the former Hercules Hernandez is being considered to come in as a Cuban gang member from Razor Ramon's past, a feud with him. Do you remember that being discussed in late 94, and why didn't that happen?
I never remember Hercules ever being discussed. We did talk about trying to get somebody from Razor's past, and that's where the whole Savio Vega suggestion was made, and that came from Razor himself because he liked working with Savio, and that goes back to the Quang days and the Quang match, my favorite match of all time, Razor and Quang.
Let's talk about Survivor Series. It goes down on November 23rd in San Antonio. Razor is the captain of a team called the Bad Guys, which is himself, 1-2-3 Kid, the British Bulldog, and the Head Shrinkers. They took on the Teamsters, which is Shawn Michaels, Diesel, Owen Hart, and Jeff Jarrett, and Jim Neidhart. What the fuck is this? It's kind of weird.
I can buy the Teamsters before I can buy the Bad Guys.
They did a gimmick here where Fatu can't wrestle in boots, and that's kind of the angle to open the match here. Meltzer gives it a 1.5 stars. Razor is, of course, the sole survivor, so that's good news for him, I guess. But we're furthering the Diesel Shawn Michaels angle here, where they're feuding and ultimately get counted out, and that's how Razor becomes the sole survivor. And after the match, Michaels throws the tag belt on the ground and drives off, making it clear he wants nothing to do with Diesel again. Meltzer would write, it was a good angle, the wrestling was below par, and the finish with a 5-way countout was horrible. Lots of match, questions here about how the shit this comes together. What can you tell us about this match from the Survivor Series from 1994?
Can you guess what the one story is that we needed to tell in that?
Well, I can see it, but God, why do you have to involve all these people for this?
Because it's a Survivor Series. Teams of 5 strive to survive.
So sometimes you got to do a lot of shit to make a little chicken salad.
Well,
and
it
was all, first what you do is you get like a razor, and then and you get a kid, and then and then from there, if only you have like some head shrinkers, and you could like kind of sprinkle them in.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. We're done with this.
And then
we got it. We don't care.
Everybody cares.
No, we don't care about that at all. He wins lots of enhancement matches over enhancement talent. One of them was against Chris Hamrick on Superstars, December 10th, 1994. If you'd like to look it up, but he loses on Raw by DQ January 9th against Owen Hart. And now we're starting to cook towards the Royal Rumble, which goes down on January 22nd, 1995. And here, Razor is defending his IC title over Jeff Jarrett. The match is pretty good. It gets 3.25 stars. They get 18 minutes and 6 seconds here. Kind of an interesting deal because we've talked about this era Jeff Jarrett with the goofy gimmick a lot, but we haven't really broken down much of his run. Jarrett is seconded here by the Roadie, which is, of course, Brian Armstrong, the Road Dogg Jesse James. And the story is Rhodey has clipped Ramon's knee, and that causes him to be counted out. They don't want to win by count out because they don't want the title. So it's the same basic deal they've been doing with Ramon and Jarrett since November on the house shows. He calls, Ramon a chicken. So of course Ramon gets back in, but he's settling the knee in the process. He's really working over the leg like Ric Flair. And eventually they go for the finish with the Razor's Edge, but his knee gives out and he drops Jarrett, who then gets an inside cradle for the pin. And now JEFF, JARR, ETT is the Intercontinental title. Pretty good match here, but I'm curious. This feels like something that there may have been politics about. Were there any politics involved in the Clique putting over Jeff Jarrett here?
No, not at all. Why would you feel there were politics involved?
Well, it feels like Jeff Jarrett's one of those guys who, for whatever reason, has some political problems here or there, and the Clique was kind of notorious for not wanting to do jobs, and maybe that's more Shawn Michaels than anybody else. Can you tell us about these guys' chemistry, the thinking here in putting the belt on Jeff Jarrett? Can you give me anything?
Well, we wanted to put the title on Jeff because we wanted to elevate Jeff at this time. So we were looking to elevate Jeff. But to go back to the political question, I'll sum it up like this: when Diesel became the WWF champion in the Garden, and Vince took everybody out, told Diesel, pick the guys that you want to go out to celebrate your win. Jeff Jarrett was one of the first names that he got out. So Jeff and the Clique, they were good, and they all hung together, and they were all good. There was no political anything whatsoever in that. But this was an opportunity to elevate Jeff and to move on and let Razor kind of go on without the belt. It was time to move on.
All right, so let's talk about what Razor is doing on the house shows after this. He doesn't really work anything of note until, and this is just fun for me, March 11th, 1995, Razor Ramon takes on Mantar on Superstars. Give me something on fucking Mantar.
Mantar, half man, half beast. Goddamn, the son of a bitch didn't have feet. He had hooves because he was a goddamn amateur wrestler from Nebraska that was just a badass that Vince looked at and liked his feet because they were huge and they looked like hooves to him. So he became Mantar, half man, half beast. God damn, look at those hooves.
Whose idea was this?
Mantar? Look at him. He's got hooves, goddammit. He's not a man, he's a tar. Mantar, I love it.
How does
Make billions.
how is Vince aware of what a centaur is, but has never seen Scarface?
The hell's a centaur?
I love you for that. In March, Razor was working with Bob Backlund on house shows, and the rumor and innuendo is that Razor goes to Vince and says he's having a hard time working with Backlund because Backlund's very old school. And he, according to the rumor and innuendo, asked Vince to bring in Dick Murdoch so Razor could throw punches with him because Backlund didn't throw punches. So Vince does it, and Murdoch comes in for a few shows and is in Backlund's corner against Razor. Is this a rib? Is this just, Vince, kowtowing to the Clique a little bit? This seems really random that there's a Dick Murdoch stint in the WWE. Give me some good stories about Dick Murdoch.
Well, first of all, a lot of people had problems working with Backlund, and no, Backlund did not throw punches, and it was difficult, but Vince always had kind of a soft spot for Bob Backlund. And yes, Razor he had an affinity for Dick Murdoch, and they had run into Murdoch at some point. I believe we were either in Amarillo or somewhere in the Panhandle, and everybody had seen Murdoch. Well, if you know Dick Murdoch, Murdoch's kind of a bullshitter, and Murdoch liked to drink beer and was always angling for a job. No matter where it was, no matter what it was, Murdoch was always angling for his next gig. Hey, bring me in. I can help you do this. I can help you do that. It was actually Dick Murdoch's idea. Goddamn, buddy, bring me in and then shit, I'll throw with you. And that way it could be exciting. I could be like Backlund's coach. And then I can get involved in the matches, and we'll make the matches exciting because I can bump and feed, and we can throw punches, and we can do all this good shit, and we'll make it exciting, and we'll have a whole lot of fun. At the same time, Dick Murdoch was a spokesman for the Coors Light people. And Dickie had a credit card from Coors Light. It said Coors Light, or Dick Murdoch Coors Light. And Dick could spend, I think, $1,000 at a bar at any time buying Coors Light for people and go out and promote and plug and promote the brand. Well, that's just a disaster waiting to happen. And it wasn't too long, I think roughly about 2 months before Dickie got his Coors Light American Express taken away from him. And he was no longer a spokesman for Coors Light, but that didn't keep him from stop drinking Coors Light. Dick Murdoch, there's a lot of controversy right now with hate groups and things like that. The rumored innuendo would have you believe, as would the American Dream Dusty Rhodes, that Dick Murdoch was a card-carrying KKK member.
Are you serious?
And that allegedly one day, Dickie said, "Come on, Dream, we're gonna go out. I'm gonna introduce you to a few of my friends." And I got in the car with Dickie Murdoch, actually the pickup truck, green pickup truck, all rusted out bed in the back. And we went on out, and it was a KKK rally. And I said, "Murdoch, get me the fuck out of here. I can't be seen around these people." And Dusty took the truck and stole Dickie Murdoch's truck and got the hell out of Dodge because he wasn't one of those people. He was the everyman. He was the American Dream and a common man, if you will, baby. But Murdoch was just fucking shithouse crazy. Dick Murdoch quit on Terry Taylor. Dick Murdoch refused to get out of the shitter when Terry Taylor sent a finish over that Murdoch refused to do. And sat in the shitter at the Sam Houston Coliseum and would only communicate with me through the shitter door in the stall. Go tell that fucking piece of shit Red Rooster. He wasn't the Red Rooster at the time. But go tell that piece of shit we're going to do the goddamn Shreveport finish. I ain't doing nothing else. Fuck him. And I had to kind of, because we had separate locker rooms. You had a heel locker room and a babyface locker room. So I had to go back and forth in between, because this is during Terry Taylor's 2.5 weeks as booker in the Mid-South Territory before everybody quit. And I came back and said, "Dickie," he said he's going to go call Bill. And Dick burst out of the shitter, and there was only one phone. There was in the back of the arena. There were the two dressing rooms on each side of the arena, and there was one payphone right in the middle. Murdoch bursts out of the stall and runs to the phone and gets on the phone and calls Bill Watts, and then sat there yelling at Terry Taylor, "Hey, you pussy motherfucker, I'm on the phone with Watts right now. We're doing the Shreveport finish. Go fuck you." And Murdoch was a colorful character. Great guy, though. A little weird.
You just said he was in the KKK, and then you followed up with
that
great
part
guy.
of one guy. And you know what? That's a dusty story. I don't know that the KKK part of it is actually true, but I just said rumor and innuendo. I never saw Dick Murdoch's KKK card. And Dick Murdoch never indicated to me in any way, shape, or form that he was a member of the KKK. But Dusty Rhodes sometimes could tell a little colorful story and all about Dick and Murdoch. Remember the original Texas Outlaws, Dick and Murdoch and Dusty Rhodes.
So do you think?
Yeah.
Do you think he was in the KKK?
I would hope not.
Well, obviously everybody.
I don't think
hopes
he was that ignorant.
My goodness. So why does Scott Hall? I mean, why does Vince bring him in? Why does he succumb to Scott Hall's pitch here?
Try anything. Just to try anything. And Murdoch, you know what? Murdoch could talk a good game, and Dickie could be pretty goddamn convincing.
Why didn't it last?
Because then Dickie became Dickie, and Dickie was running up, taking everybody out, buying them Coors Light every night, and getting everybody fucked up. And then Dickie was getting fucked up and showing up late and being Dick Murdoch and getting in fights out on the road. And after a while, you can only take so much of it.
Next up, May 19th. And we see Razor Ramon defeat Jeff Jarrett to win the Intercontinental title in a ladder match. And this is Razor's third time with the title. But the switch happens at a house show Why does it happen at a house show instead of Raw?
Because anything can happen at a house show, and house show business wasn't that great. And we wanted to be able to present the aura that if the WWF is coming to your town, you cannot miss it. This is must see because anything can happen. And good God, man, just look what happened here. We had Razor Ramon win the Intercontinental Championship. So,
and just 2 days later, he loses it back to Jeff Jarrett. That happens on May 21st. So the plan here was, it's clear. Let's just show that anything can happen. We're not necessarily shifting gears creatively. Let's just give them something to talk about, right?
And you know what? Because anything can happen, by God. And these two guys knew each other so well that on any given night, you could see that championship change hands. So if it comes to your town, and could that be the last time that these two ever meet? You never know. Because Jarrett had that clause in his contract that he had to get a rematch within 30 days.
June 17th, we see Razor tagging with Bam Bam Bigelow in a dark match where they actually defeat Owen Hart and Yokozuna, but by count out, so the belts don't change hands. What did Razor think about working with Bam Bam Bigelow? There's rumor and innuendo that Shane Douglas had his problems with the Clique, but that Bam Bam Bigelow never did. Your thoughts?
Say what? They hated Bam Bam.
Well, that's my question.
They being the Clique hated Bam Bam, and they felt that he was too slow, out of shape, didn't look the part. The list goes on and on. My opinion, I think that there was a little bit of jealousy from the WrestleMania 11 main event,
right?
And the fact that Bam Bam and Lawrence Taylor were really what that whole WrestleMania was built around. And they felt that Bam Bam didn't deserve that spot, and that the Shawn Michaels Diesel match should have been the headline match on that, and that's what should have been the last match, so on and so forth. Yeah, they didn't like Bam Bam being positioned as a babyface, didn't like his work, and there just was just big time friction. They did not get along.
What did Bigelow think about them?
The same. I think that he felt that they were spoiled brats, and felt that he was being held down by the Clique, and that he should have been, that the reason that he wasn't in the main event picture for the championship was because of the Clique kind of bad-mouthing him.
Let's talk about some other guys. I feel like I've tried to bring this up a few times and you've kind of shut me down, but now you've said Bigelow is on the list. Who else is on the list for having issues with the Clique? Shane Douglas, Bam Bam Bigelow, whom else?
Well, see, I was going to go to Shane Douglas, and Shane Douglas came from Shane coming in and had been hyped up big time. So when Shane comes in, they put him with Razor, and well, first of all, they put him with Shawn, and then Shawn had his issue in Syracuse with the guys beating him up in the parking lot. So now you've got Shane with Razor, and the feeling was, and again, it's that big, big fish, small pond, and now you're in the ocean. And Shane was, in their eyes, a step behind them. And Razor felt that Shane couldn't keep up, and that Shane wasn't the guy. Shane, I think, was having a hard time with the whole Dean Douglas gimmick, because it wasn't Shane Douglas. It was this Dean Douglas thing. And Vince had this idea of what he saw in the Dean, and that whole gimmick was based on Douglas, and always talking about how he's going to be a doctor, or he's going to be a teacher, or all these other things that Shane would always profess that he was going to do. I thought Shane was a great worker, but they did not get along, and the Clique, Razor in particular, did not like working with Shane Douglas. Just felt he was way behind.
Anybody else you can think of that maybe had issues? There's rumor and innuendo that Bob Holly had a problem. Anybody else?
I really don't. I don't remember Bob Holly. Bob Holly was there as Sparky Plug, I guess, during that time. But Bob Holly's not the kind of guy to take shit off of anybody, even in those days. So I'd never heard that. I'm sure if you mentioned some other names, I could say yes or no. But off the top of my head, I don't really remember.
Okay.
Brett, obviously.
Well, let's talk about that. But, we know the issues with Sean there at the end. There's rumor out there, we're pivoting here, that Brett had a problem with a finish at Survivor Series against Kevin Nash, and he didn't want to do the finish a certain way. And according to the rumor and innuendo, Undertaker, who was going to be working with Kevin Nash next as Diesel, of course, said everything's not fucking about you or something like that. Do you recall there being any sort of friction with Kevin Nash or the Clique besides Shawn Michaels and Bret Hart?
Absolutely. Absolutely. There definitely was friction between Kevin Nash and Bret, and especially during that time, because Bret viewed himself as kind of the, I guess we'll call him the Ric Flair champion at the time, because he was really the only multi-time champion that we had in there. And Bret felt that he was really the only one deserved of being a champion. And Bret would be very vocal, as was Diesel and the Clique, and they would be vocal about stuff. The finishing question, and I go back to the finishing question, was a small package on Diesel.
Right.
And it was actually my finish. That when we were going over a finish, going back and forth, I said, why can't Bret just catch him and wrap him up in a small package? And everybody thought that was dead. They felt, well, after all this match, after all this shit going back and forth, he's going to beat me with a small package. Bret wanted to beat him with his finish. That doesn't, for Diesel to tap out at that point to the sharpshooter, my opinion, didn't make sense. But a wrestler could beat that big bastard if he caught him in a small package. And I thought that made the most sense. That's eventually what we ended up going with. But Bret had this thing, and going off on Bret and kind of why people had that opinion of him. When made him champion, he came in and says, well, Vince, who am I going to work with? And Vince had all these people, and Vince had him going over heels on TV like every other week to build him as a champion. And Vince just handed him the talent roster, said, Bret, who else is there to beat? Who the hell are we going to book you with? And he had no answer. So and of course, that shit gets out because everybody would promo in the dressing room. And obviously, Clique was vocal, Bret was vocal. So yeah, they definitely had their problems.
All right, let's keep it moving here. Let's talk about the King of the Ring. That's what we're up to next. We've got June 25th, 1995, when it's going down. Razor's supposed to be in the tournament, but a rib injury that he suffered in a ladder match against Jeff Jarrett on June 9th hasn't healed enough. So Razor is actually in Savio's corner for his matches, but Vega actually makes it to the finals of the tournament before losing to Mabel. Was the original plan for Razor to be in the tournament, and would he have won the tournament or worked the main against Mabel, or what were the original plans for him?
The original plans were for Razor to be in the tournament. However, he was never scheduled to win the tournament. The tournament was always for Mabel to go over and then go on and work with Diesel going forward. But I believe that the end of it was supposed to be Razor putting Mabel over just to get him ready for Kevin Nash, Diesel, SummerSlam.
Was there any suspicion, because this has been accused of Shawn Michaels many times, that Shawn would fake an injury because he didn't want to drop a belt? Did Hall ever get that accusation?
I think probably the opposite, because Hall was a guy that worked with injuries and was always willing to go out there and do whatever it would take. And I think that this was something that I believe it was legitimate, and I don't think that he was sandbagging at all, because the past had always indicated that he was willing to do business and do whatever it took. Razor did not have that reputation.
At the next In Your House pay-per-view, the second one, goes down on July 23rd, 1995. This time we're in Nashville, Tennessee, and Razor is making his return to the ring, this time tagging with Savio Vega to take on Men on a Mission. The match actually got 2 3/4 stars, which you might not have ever imagined from this match. It goes about 10 minutes. As Vega and Mo both go over the top, Mabel squashes Ramon with a belly-to-belly suplex for the pin. And Meltzer would write that this was gutsy, but also logical booking, having one of the most over faces do a clean job to get the heel ready for his title shot. But it's something most U.S. offices have backed away from for years. So Men on a Mission get the victory here, and Vega doesn't lose. Ramon does. Any sort of protest from Razor here, or what's the thinking in having him lose here?
I will go back to the SummerSlam. Okay, we're going to get there in a minute with SummerSlam. This was actually, again, another indication of Razor being a pro, and no, there was no pushback at all, because he was getting the guy over for the champion. He was getting Mabel over. It was his first pay-per-view back after the injury, and he was going to be doing the job at King of the Ring had he been able. So here was his time to be able to put Mabel over clean, get him ready for the world champion at SummerSlam. There's no pushback at all.
Was there ever a consideration to make Razor Ramon a tag team champion? I ask because he teamed with 1-2-3 Kid a lot. He teamed with Savio Vega a lot, and they had lots of title opportunities against the likes of Owen Hart and Yokozuna and other guys, but it never really happened. Can you speak to why Razor never got a tag title run?
Because he was such of a strong character in and of himself, and be able to use him in particular here with Savio Vega is you're using the star power of Razor Ramon to give Savio the rub. And hopefully when they split off under their singles run, hopefully some of that shine from Razor is going to stay on Savio, and vice versa with the 1-2-3 Kid. But I think that you would kind of saddle that character with the tag team titles.
Now we're on the road to SummerSlam 95. It's announced Razor is going to challenge Shawn Michaels for the Intercontinental title in a ladder match, which is, of course, a rematch from their historic match the year prior at WrestleMania 10. And it's announced on TV at first that Michaels would defend the IC belt against Sid at SummerSlam. Why was it changed?
I think this was baseball season. Not baseball season, softball season. I think Sid had gone home.
Is that the real answer? He just dipped?
I did.
Why was the rematch done, all this time later? It feels like if you were looking to do a rematch, you could have done it the SummerSlam after WrestleMania. Was this just, we lost Sid, let's give him something spectacular, let's make up for it, why don't we do the rematch? And it's just, how can we replace what we promised? You've got to bring them something bigger?
Well, I think everybody still was looking back at the WrestleMania match as this awesome match between Shawn and Razor, and now you're basically doing a substitution because we were originally going somewhere, and now you don't have that attraction anymore. What is an attraction that people are going to accept and maybe even say this is better? And if they go back and they remember how great that the ladder match was at WrestleMania, then folks, we're going to give you that rematch here at SummerSlam. It would have made no sense to do that match from WrestleMania to SummerSlam the same year. But now there's been some time, and you can go back and you can kind of use that history to say, holy shit, people, remember how great that match was?
Let me ask this. Obviously we're armchair quarterbacking here. You guys are pushing Shawn Michaels as the top babyface, and the prior month he beats Jeff Jarrett to become the Intercontinental Champion. If you're really trying to push Shawn Michaels and position him to be the top guy, which it certainly feels like by SummerSlam 95, that's the plan. Would you agree?
Not for Vince, no.
Okay. When was that decision made? He won the world title 8 months later.
A few months. It still took him a few months. I mean, it really did. He still didn't see Shawn as the guy, and this was still Shawn's proving time to show you I can do it.
Here's what I'm getting to. Wouldn't it have made more sense to have Razor beat Jarrett at In Your House for the IC title, and then have Shawn beat Razor for the title in the ladder match, as opposed to Shawn just defending the IC title?
Well, that would. No, it wouldn't, because we had to finish up the whole No, it wouldn't, because we had to finish up the whole Shawn Michaels, Jeff Jarrett angle at the In Your House in July. So we had to finish that up, and then he was going on to Sid and climb that mountain. So yeah, shit got fucked up when Sid left.
So let's run through the match here. This is almost as good as the first one, but it's kind of like movies. The sequel is often never as good as the first one. Meltzer gave it 4 3/4 stars. This one gets a little bit more time, 24 minutes and 58 seconds, and Shawn gets the win here. Michaels gets the bigger pop coming out, and Ramon wasn't booed at all, except by a small smattering of fans midway through the match when he was destroying Michaels. So it's more pro Ramon than you may believe, but these guys really tore the house down. A huge match here. That I recommend everybody watch if you haven't already. It's SummerSlam 95. Meltzer would write, for drama, this was better than the WrestleMania match, but not for bumps. Both climbed to the top of the ladder, and it ended up tipping over with Michaels crotching himself on the way down and Ramon falling out of the ring. Ramon got a second ladder from under the ring and brought it in. Michaels climbed a ladder, but Ramon used the razor's edge off the ladder, and both climbed a different ladder, but at the top, Michaels used a super kick and dove for the belt, but missed. Razor goes for another razor's edge, but Michaels flips out of it, and Ramon goes over the top. Michaels then climbs and makes a leaping grab for the belt, which was supposed to be the finish, except the belt didn't come down with him. Michaels looks visibly pissed at missing the spot, then climbs back up and nicely pulled the belt down for the finish. Ramon grabbed the belt after the match and teased a heel turn before handing the belt to Michaels and shaking his hand. So another classic. Any sort of memories from this match, the planning of it? Do you remember any sort of discussion about the real life friendship and how this match may or may not have been affected?
Well, Pat Patterson in laying this match out and talking with the talent, the whole thing, how do we top what we did at WrestleMania? Instead of one ladder, we will have 2 ladders at a pay to face. And of course, Meltzer in his infinite wisdom did get it wrong. The finish was supposed to be when Shawn made a leap for the belt and missed. Shawn was supposed to get the belt and drop with it.
That's actually word for word what he said.
He said that they did that, and then they went into another spot, and then they went to the next point where Shawn went up and tried to get the belt and held on to it, but it wouldn't come down, and that was the fucked up finish. No, that was the audible. The fucked up finish was when Shawn made the first leap for the belt, and when it came down and Shawn was like, I missed the belt, came down, that's when Razor went up for the Razor's edge, and Shawn dumped him over the top. Shawn went back up, tried to get the belt down, and it was hooked on so good, Shawn figured he would go up there, grab the belt, come down with it. It didn't come down a second time. That's when Shawn went up, fucking ripped the thing off. He was livid. But the first leap in the miss, that was supposed to be the finish. Shawn was supposed to catch the belt there and bring it down. That's when they went in and Shawn dumped Razor over the top rope. Shawn went back up, went to grab the belt. He had it, pulled down, and the belt wouldn't break and it wouldn't give. It was snapped on too well. And so then he went up a third time and finally got the belt.
There's a rumor out there that at WrestleMania 10, there was only one ladder in the building. Like, these days when you have a ladder match, there are backup ladders in case something fucks up. So if the ladder collapses or breaks or malfunctions or is no longer functional, they've got something else to call. There's rumor that at the first one, WrestleMania 10, there's only one ladder there. And so they got smartened up here and thought, just in case we need fucking more ladders. Do you remember that being the case?
I do remember a situation where we had a ladder match and the ladder broke. And that's when... And I don't know if it was at a house show or at WrestleMania. I really don't remember that. But we did have a ladder match where they only had one ladder out there. The ladder broke, and they're like, what do we do now? So somehow they improvised and were able to do it. But for this match in particular, it was Pat Patterson. At a pace, we'll get another ladder. And then Michael Hayes tops that shit. Well, hell, we not just gonna get 2 ladders. We're gonna get 8 ladders, and we're gonna have one that's 75 feet tall. And Jeff Hardy's gonna climb to the top of it. He's gonna go doop doop doop. He's gonna take a big ass bump, miss, screw, crash and burn. Fuck you. Something like that.
Which do you prefer? WrestleMania 10, SummerSlam 95.
The better match was definitely WrestleMania 10, but for just ingenuity and on the fly, this was a great match because of the way the guys had to keep on improvising to finally get up there and get the damn thing down. Well, I like the original WrestleMania.
After the match, Razor's in the locker room, and Dean Douglas was critiquing the match and tried to sucker punch Razor, but he blocked it and knocked Douglas down. So literally, right after the match with Shawn, he starts a brand new feud with the newcomer, Dean Douglas. Why was it decided that Razor was going to be the guy to work with Douglas?
God damn, we got to put a rocket ship under this kid. He's a Dean, and he's a Douglas.
You got Dean Douglas, man. He's got natural fucking heat with everybody. He's a shit disturber, and it was a perfect time when a guy's down. Man, you shit on him when he's down. So, beautiful time to start a nice little issue here with them.
I guess my question is, was there any sort of thought put into, hey, here's a new guy, Razor can help get him over? Is that the position that Razor's in at this point? Sort of like Randy was 2 years prior?
Probably, yes. Absolutely.
Okay.
Razor's the top guy, and Vince wanted to be able to take Dean Douglas and put him into a top spot.
Next up, we're going to talk about Dean Douglas. He was on our poll this week. He lost. We're going to talk about him long form. I want to know more about the gimmick and all that, but we'll circle back. We're going long in this show already. September, we see British Bulldog defeat Razor Ramon on Raw by DQ. On Superstars, Razor picks up a win over Goldust in a dark match. Back on Raw, though, he loses to the 1-2-3 Kid. So Ramon is has Razor fallen out of favor here, or why is he losing so often? It feels like some of the push, some of the shine may be fading a little bit.
I don't think that the shine was necessarily fading. I just think everybody can't, you can't win all the time.
I get that, but sometimes guys fall out of favor with Vince, or they have bad behavior behind the scenes, or they piss someone off, or they go against protocol, or they've got heat. It's not always, you can't win all the time. Sometimes there's more to it. Was there more to it?
There was not more to it in this instance at all. It was to be able to further the story and to be able to have a guy that isn't going to win all the time. And it's just to be able to further a story and continue on with the Razor.
We then move on to In Your House 3, which went down on September 24th in Saginaw, Michigan. Here is where we see Razor wrestle Dean Douglas. Kind of an interesting match here. Dean pins Razor in just about 15 minutes, and Bob Backlund comes out and introduces Douglas and stays in his corner and actually acts as his manager, perhaps only for the night. We don't know at this point. But Ramon looks good, and Dave would say some of Douglas's offense looked weak. They went to near falls, and there was a ref bump. Douglas misses a splash off the top, and Ramon uses the Razor's Edge for the pin. But Backlund continues to hold the ref to keep him from turning around and counting. And at this point, 1-2-3 Kid runs in and tries to count the fall. But when Ramon turns around and sees it's Kid and not the ref, he shoves Kid out of the ring. And then Douglas comes from behind and cradles him for the pin. So Meltzer's kind of even critiquing the finish here and says the shove looked great, but the cradle couldn't have looked more sloppy. And after the match, we see Ramon and Kid having a pull apart with the agents. Meltzer is not high on Douglas's pay-per-view debut here. What did you think of this match?
I would have to agree with him on that. And this was already the wrap on Shane Douglas. Now I'm going to defend Shane here because Shane comes in and Shane really wants to make a good impression on everybody. So Shane wants to get along and Shane wants to bust his ass and Shane wants that top spot. Now he's working with the top guy in Razor. And he's already hearing, rumblings of, wow, is Shane in the best shape that he possibly could have been in coming in here? Has he lost a step? Are we really going to – God, he's not as big as I thought he was. All of this crap getting in Shane's head. And he gets out there for his first match on pay-per-view now, big spotlight. And I think that the bullshit got in Shane's head – that he was apprehensive and he was just outthinking himself and he outworked himself. That they were oil and water. You throw Backlund into that mix, which we already knew Backlund didn't have chemistry with Razor, but Vince wanted to try Backlund out there with Dean Douglas. Felt that, well, we'll give him some more heat by putting Backlund with it. And oh God, it was a disaster on top of a disaster. And Shane didn't do himself any favors by being timid. I think he would have been better off to go out there and been snug and fought for a position.
Scott has said that Douglas came into the WWF with a lot of hype, and allegedly it was Hall's job to get him ready for Shawn because they had a big plan for them and a big feud for them set up. And Scott puts the word out that Shane's overrated. And it feels like it's the beginning of the end for Dean Douglas. Do you think, the writing was on the wall for Shane after this match here with Razor on pay-per-view?
The writing was on the wall after the European tour that I believe came right after the pay-per-view.
Okay.
Because Shane was on the road every single night with Razor, and I think the agents and Razor, without a doubt, was letting everybody know, he's not there for the spots, man. And Razor turned it up. The slower that Shane got, the faster Razor got.
So pretty soon after this, we see Razor and 1-2-3 Kid on Raw, and this time Razor gets a win. But that works so well. Now they've kind of settled their differences. They're putting it behind them. And on Superstars, Razor and 1-2-3 Kid are teaming up, and they're taking on the Blue Brothers, and they get a win. As we head on into October, another In Your House, this time in Winnipeg, Canada, Razor is all over the place. First of all, he's earned a tag title shot with 1-2-3 Kid, and they're taking on the Smoking Guns for the belts. The Guns get the win in nearly 13 minutes. Not a great match, but not an awful match. 2 3/4 stars. Kind of an interesting finish here because Ramon's going for the Razor's Edge on Billy and stalls while Kid begs for the tag so he could win the title. After more stalling, Ramon finally tags Kid, who went for the cocky pin, but Billy ends up crucifying him to the mat for the 1-2-3, and they keep the title. Kid, I guess, is teasing a heel turn here because he's throwing a tantrum and shoving Ramon, who's walked out. 2 3/4 stars. What'd you think here?
That is what we would call a fart in church. The Guns weren't over enough,
right?
And there wasn't enough rebuild in the whole Razor Ramon 1-2-3 Kid relationship, in my opinion. It was rushed, and there just wasn't any feeling in it that people really cared at this point.
Meltzer says the only indication you knew it was even a turn is later they did called the WWF hotline thing. And in the vignette, Kid is rude to the caller. And that's supposed to be like, hey, if you missed it earlier, Kid's definitely a bad guy. Look at the way he's being mean to a fan here.
And that's one of my biggest pet peeves on heel turns, which I was talking to a kid at Booker's show, is when you turn heel or when you turn babyface, especially for a heel that turns babyface, they stop doing the cool things that the audience liked them as a heel. And they're all of a sudden nice and kissing babies. You have a babyface that turns heel, now all of a sudden he's got to say, this town sucks and you suck. Be the same guy, just do heel as shit in the ring.
Right. Later in the show, it feels like we talk about this a lot. Shawn Michaels is supposed to be defending the Intercontinental title against Dean Douglas, but a few days before this, Shawn was attacked outside of a bar in Syracuse. I'm sure we'll talk about that another time at long form. Either way, here's Shawn again, forfeiting the Intercontinental title, this time in the ring to Douglas, and then Razor comes out to wrestle Douglas for the title. This is how it goes down on the Observer. Ramon pinned Dean Douglas to win the Intercontinental title in 11 minutes and 1 second. Before the match, Michael slowly walked to the ring with the cameras focusing on his battered and sad eyes. He slowly gave up the title and slowly walked back. Those few minutes were a production masterpiece. Both the crowd and match were dead early, coming off with the downer, and the two basically did nothing for the first 8 minutes. It appeared they were pacing for a 25-plus minute match, but Ramon didn't even try, and facially made that obvious. The last 2 minutes were very good, and some nice moves and near falls before a flat finish, where Ramon used a back suplex and both fell down. Ramon had his arm draped on Douglas, and the ref counted 3. The ring announcer did the tease, saying the winner and IC champ, Razor Ramon. Douglas's leg was under the ropes to give him his out. This was real bad. 1 star. So I guess my question is, and we'll talk about the Shawn Michaels thing another time, because I know that that's going to be a fucking 30-minute conversation. Why take the belt off of Douglas literally after, just minutes after he got it? Why not have, whoever wins this match is going to be champion? Because now in the record books, Dean Douglas was the Intercontinental champion for 11 minutes.
Well, essentially, that's what we did. I mean, we did have the match for the championship, but you had to do something and felt that it would be more heat on Shane if Shawn had to forfeit the title and give him that one little bit. But the jury was out. It was DOA. Vince had already given up on Shane at this point.
Well, but the finish, with there being a foot under the ropes, makes you think that they're giving themselves an out in case they want to come back and do a rematch. But that rematch never happens. Is it because Vince just had given up on Dean, or this match in particular turned him against Dean, or what can you tell me about that?
Vince had already given up on him. I know that for sure. Vince was done. That's the whole reason that he had the Razor match and wanted to get the championship on Razor so quick. I think that they left the out there in case all of a sudden Shane could step up and go out there and have a hell of a match with Razor and prove that he could hang. I think Razor helped that situation by kind of working half-assed. Razor went in essentially knowing Vince had given up on him. So it was DOA, man. It was dead on arrival.
November 13th, 1995 is when we see the Raw where Sid defeats Razor Ramon when 1-2-3 Kid is the guest referee for the match, and he pulls Sid down from the Razor's edge and then fast counts Razor and turns heel. Bruce, why did it make sense to put 1-2-3 Kid in this spot and do the heel turn here?
Because Razor and Kevin Nash and Shawn Michaels liked the 1-2-3 Kid to travel with them. And Chief Jay Strongbow, as a matter of fact, used to have a nickname for the 1-2-3 Kid. He called him Trailer, because you would see Shawn Michaels walk into the building with a sport coat, sunglasses on. Usually you would have Nash behind him, and then Razor behind him, and then trailing behind with all the bags would be the 1-2-3 Kid. So Chunga nicknamed him the Trailer. So that's why, because they wanted Shawn to be with them all the time outside of the ring as well, so they could all travel together.
So he needs to be involved in their angle as a heel?
Yeah, he needs to be heel now.
Let me ask you this. It's reported around this time that, and I guess this is sometime in October, Razor was trying to renegotiate a little bit with Vince. He specifically has put feelers out with All Japan, and there's a story out there that Hall goes to Vince and asks if there's anything he can do to improve on or get in a better position for the company, or what can he do a better job with. And Vince says that there isn't anything he needs to improve on and that he's happy with his work. So then Hall wants to know what he can do to make more money and asks for a raise. Vince essentially says no, And Hall asks if he can go work in Japan a few weeks at a time, a few times a year, for All Japan and get some of their cash. And Vince also says no. Now, I find this curious, Bruce, because just a few months after this, when you guys are negotiating with Vader, you guys make a deal work where he has the ability to work some dates in Japan. But it's a no for Scott Hall. And I think this no would ultimately lead to a situation where he winds up exploring other options. Do you remember the conversation? Did Vince ever tell you about the conversation where Razor comes to him and talks to him about money?
No, because it's a non-issue, and the Vader situation, Scott Hall situation are two completely different situations. The Vader deal was a deal that the company made money off of, and we sent them a match that we got paid for, and the talent also got paid. It was a one-off. It was one match. Scott wanted to go over and work All Japan or New Japan, wherever the hell he wanted to go, and be away from the WWF at the time, working in Japan for whatever 5-6 weeks at a time. So Vince didn't want to give up that time. He needed Razorback here with the company. You're either, with us or you're not. With the Vader deal, that was just one-off stuff that we got paid for. We reaped the rewards. There was nothing to reap on the Razor deal if he went over and worked for them. That's not what he wanted to do.
All right, I'm going to ask my question again. Did Vince McMahon tell you when Razor came and asked for more money? Did you know about that? What did the conversation sound like when Vince told you about it?
I didn't know about it until much later, after Razor had already made his deal and negotiated with WCW. And then it was an issue of, who do we want to keep?
I see. So do you think, in hindsight, Vince made a mistake by not entertaining a conversation about giving him a raise or allowing him to make more money outside of the company, just to keep him in-house?
100%. I believe that if Vince had, and Vince would tell you this too, that if Vince had, when Razor came to him and told him, if you just give me a guaranteed deal, and that's the way it was presented to me, was that Razor wanted guaranteed money and wanted a guaranteed contract. If Vince had done the guaranteed contract for Razor at that time, that it would have essentially changed everything, and that he wished, hindsight being 20/20 at the time, that he had made that deal with Scott before he went and negotiated.
Next up is Survivor Series, November 19th, 1995, Landover, Maryland. Razor is a part of a wild card elimination tag match, which the concept was it's baby faces teaming up with heels. So Razor is teamed up with Owen, Yoko, and Dean Douglas to take on Shawn, Ahmed, Bulldog, and Sid. Razor eliminated Sid after Michaels accidentally hit Sid with Sweet Chin Music, and Bulldog eliminated Razor after his power slam. What was the concept here, and why did this happen? It feels like something we haven't seen before or since.
This was a Bill Watts idea, and this was Bill's idea of kind of just throwing everything against the wall. They can't predict it. They don't know what's going to happen, and just all this crazy shit that made absolutely no sense. And it was difficult to put together because it made no sense. But Watts just wanted to do this wild card thing just to be different. And you have your top guys in Shawn Michaels and Sid and guys that have issues, and now they have to coexist. Now, the finish with Shawn kicking Sid, that was his way out of it, but it made zero sense, and it was difficult for us to sell, and it was difficult to understand as a fan watching it.
Kind of, run of the mill towards the end of the year. Let's talk about the In Your House 5 pay-per-view, December 17th. This one's in Hershey. We see the Intercontinental Champion Razor teaming up with Marty Jannetty to take on Sid and the 1-2-3 Kid. It gets a 1.25 in the Observer. They go about 12.5 minutes. Kind of a forgettable match. Meltzer would write, This match was a disappointment as Jannetty's work has been slow and sluggish since returning, and Sid was pretty bad. The match just didn't get going, although there was good heat for Ramon versus Kid. This is pretty recent after Kid's heel turn on Razor, and it feels like this could have been an opportunity to just have Razor and Kid, battle for the IC title. But instead, we've got Sid and Marty Jannetty here. What's the thinking here?
Again, this was kind of during the Bill Watts regime, and Bill liked to mix things up. Bill liked to have different for different sake. A lot of times, sometimes different for different sake works, but this was just a hodgepodge of shit.
Right.
And it was, as you say, you had a natural match in Razor versus 1-2-3 Kid, and it was a proven winner that people were actually interested in.
Right.
But instead, it was, well, let's throw Sid in there, and you know what? I kid you not. Bruce really likes Marty Jannetty, which I did. Let's get Marty into this mix, and maybe we can do something with Marty, and none of it. It just didn't work because it was a hodgepodge and it didn't make any sense. And if it doesn't make any sense as you're trying to explain it and sell it, the audience will never make sense of it.
Well, let me chat you up about December 15th. Do you remember a Stu Hart tribute show to celebrate Stu's 80th birthday and his life and accomplishments that they did in Calgary?
I remember having it, yes.
Okay.
I wasn't there, but yeah.
Okay. You weren't there, so we'll keep moving. Never mind. Let's talk about what I guess a lot of people have tuned in to hear, and people are remembering this pretty fondly because we get questions about it all the time. It's Razor Ramon and Goldust, and it comes out that they're going to be in an Intercontinental title match at the 1996 Royal Rumble. And Dave starts the 96 Observer really covering this in great depth. He reports that Razor Ramon was complaining long and loud about this program with Goldust. Apparently, the baby faces in the clique hate the gimmick and unfortunately have taken it out on Dustin Rhodes, the person, rather than accepting him as someone saddled with a bad gimmick who was just trying to do his job. Granted, the angle is really lame. Ramon is trying to get the program switched with Hunter Hearst Helmsley. So there's lots of rumor and innuendo that specifically Razor didn't want to work an angle with a quote-unquote homosexual because of the fear that his son would see it and he wouldn't want to have to explain it, or some sort of weird homophobia answer. What really happened?
That is exactly what happened. And Razor made it long and loud and made the case continuously that he did not want to work with Goldust. They did not, at least in my recollection, ever really take it out on Dustin. They knew that Dustin was playing a character, and Dustin was going out, and Dustin was working his gimmick. And it was us that wanted to exploit the gimmick and to do some controversial things. Machismo and Razor Ramon and Goldust I thought was a natural rivalry and one that would play well. I still have the teddy bear that Goldust gave Razor Ramon to tell him, as a gift from Goldust to Razor. But Razor just looked at it as...
Can you tweet that picture out Friday?
What's that?
Can you tweet the picture out Friday?
Yes, I will. I will tweet the picture out Friday. I'll take the picture tonight, so I have it. But Razor just looked at it as a homosexual angle, and he didn't want to be involved in it. He felt that it was in poor taste. He didn't like it, didn't want to do it, and no matter what, he just didn't want to do it. We went to Bangor, Maine, to shoot an angle with Goldust and Razor, and it was Vince, myself, Michael Hayes, and a few other people. And good God, the meeting took forever with Razor and Vince, to where finally, Razor came out and we did the angle just as Vince had it laid out, and it was a whole brawl in the parking lot in the alleyway there. But the idea behind that was we kind of knew, half-assed at the time, we wanted to take this to WrestleMania and have the big blow-off at WrestleMania. But just Razor Razor hated it. Razor hated it for all those reasons. And every chance that he got, he would badmouth it and try and sabotage it to not have it happen.
It's worth mentioning that Razor has come out pretty strong in recent years and said that he feels like him complaining about this angle hurt his career and hurt Dustin's feelings, and he wished he could take it all back and do it all over again. But obviously, live and learn, I guess. January.
Well, I think it did hurt it. I think it did hurt his career because he didn't want to do business, and I think that if he had just tried it on and done it, that he would have found that it would have worked.
Well, he could have just went home and sat home and told Vince if he wanted to drop the belt, he could come get it.
And count his millions in his ivory tower?
Yeah. I mean, it worked for the Heartbreak Kid.
Well.
Let's talk about January 13th, 1996. I mentioned this because there's an episode here of Superstars where a very young Jeff Hardy gets a win over Razor Ramon by countout. That's pretty fun. I also want to mention that on January 15th, Razor taped an episode of the Jerry Springer Show where they did a Make-A-Wish deal. And I know that there has to be a good story behind Razor Ramon on Jerry Springer.
Was it Jerry Springer? I remember that. And Razor felt just a lot of the guys have issues with Make-A-Wish, which is strange, as big of a company as WWE, as much as they do now with Make-A-Wish. But back in the day, some of the guys had an issue dealing with kids with terminal illnesses, because it's hard to look a kid in the eye knowing that they're not going to be around for long and that their last wish is to meet you. So we got this request, and Razor actually gave away the Intercontinental Championship.
The real one. This is before.
The real one.
This is before replicas.
This young man on the show.
Yeah.
And came back and says, "Yeah, I need another belt because I gave the other one away." Which, again, today that wouldn't be a problem. At the time, it was like, huh? They only had, the belts that we had, so it wasn't met with, way to go, good job. But if they, again, different time, different place. But it was a cool deal, and it was a big moment for us and for Razor.
Let's talk about the Royal Rumble. January 21st, 1996 is when this thing's going down. It's out in Fresno, California, and Goldust gets his big win over Razor Ramon in about 14 minutes. And they get 2 3/4 stars. This is for the IC title. This is worth mentioning. Goldust, this is hilarious to me. Meltzer wrote, Goldust came out with a nicely dressed woman with an unlit cigar in her mouth and a director's chair, whose name the next night was given as Marlene. The woman was Terry Runnels, his wife. He used to be Alexandra York in WCW several years back. We're going to talk all about this character another time, guys. I can't wait to do it. I'm just reading from the Observer. There were several F-word chants in the crowd. Goldust rubbed his chest, fondled Ramon's chest, and got spanked by Ramon, but liked it. Then he started hiding behind Marlene. When Ramon finally picked her up to get Goldust, he jumped him. After a bulldog and a slingshot suplex for near falls, Ramon came back, but had Marlene blow something in his eyes. Goldust got a sleeper on, and Mr. Perfect commented that if he put Ramon to sleep, he could do anything with him he wanted, which McMahon ignored. McMahon totally toned down the gay inferences on the commentary, but Perfect more than made up for it, although it appeared McMahon wasn't happy that he did. Ramon broke it with a low blow and came back with a choke slam and a fallaway slam for near falls. As Goldust went to the top, Ramon took out his legs and Goldust crotched himself. Ramon used a backward suplex, and at this point Marlene faked that she twisted her ankle, distracting the ref, allowing the 1-2-3 Kid to come out and use a spin kick off the top rope on Ramon, giving Goldust the pin. So lots of stuff going on here. It's Marlena's debut. It's the first time there have been really loud, audible F-word chants at Goldust. And it feels like McMahon is starting to tone back some of the commentary that had been there before. Is that because it's Razor, or because Vince is sort of getting cold feet about it, and that's why he pairs his smoking hot wife, Terry Runnels, with him, and then tones down the commentary at the same time?
we've been getting a little bit of feedback, and Vince wanted to tone it down for that reason. And because it was a Royal Rumble and we're live, Perfect threw in his jabs, which Vince was not happy about, because he wanted to present Goldust as
he's androgynous, damn it. He's not gay. He's not a homosexual. He's androgynous.
Now, trying to explain to a 7-year-old kid in Huntsville, Alabama, what the hell androgynous is.
You just show him a picture of Bruce Prichard in 2017. They got it.
Easy, Tiger. I was gonna point to the teddy bear over there. So yeah, Vince was definitely trying to shy away from it just because of the feedback, not necessarily because of Razor, but at this point, Vince was very frustrated with Razor because he felt that Goldust had legs and felt that Goldust was going to be a great heel for us and a hell of a character for us, and that Razor's unwillingness to work with him and to be able to take this angle even further just kind of shot Dustin in the foot. So Vince's idea here was to go ahead, get the title on Goldust and move forward doing something else.
Next up, we've got Hunter going over Razor by countout on Raw the next night. But he does pick up a win a week or two later over Jeff Jarrett by DQ. And before you know it, it's time for another In Your House match, this one from the Louisville Gardens in Kentucky. And this is kind of a more memorable moment because of just how silly it is. It's Razor and the 1-2-3 Kid in a crybaby match where the loser had to wear a diaper. I found it fitting that this shit happened in Kentucky because this feels like something that Jim Cornette would have booked.
Goddamn, fuck you, motherfucker. Everybody wants to see somebody in a diaper.
Was it Cornette's idea?
No, this, okay, it was Cornette's idea.
Goddamn, it's Louisville. Gotta have a crybaby match. That's what my mama would want to see happen. Not give Mama Cornette whatever she wants.
Ramon pinned Kid in a baby bottle match in 12 minutes and 1 second. 1-2-3 Kid came out with a stroller and a Ramon teddy bear. Kid looked smaller than usual, like in the 180-pound range. Even with the size difference, they had a good match. This is directly from the Observer. Ted DiBiase threw baby powder in Ramon's eyes to give Kid an advantage, and then Kid used a lengthy sleeper, which neither Ramon nor the announcers had a clue of how to effectively sell, and it went over the head of most of the crowd as well. Finally, Ramon broke the hold by crotching Kid on the ropes, and they went several near falls before DiBiase distracted the ref and threw the baby powder bottle to Kid. Kid poured the powder in his hands, but when Ramon turned around, he kicked Kid in the hands, and the powder went into Kid's own eyes. So Ramon used the razor's edge and refused to pin Kid, so he did a second one. And then Ramon put the baby bottle in Kid's mouth, threw powder in DiBiase's eyes, put a diaper on Kid, and poured baby powder all over him. When Kid revived in the ring, he started crying. 3 stars.
Oh, God. As you read through this, Vince's biggest pet peeve and one of the things that he hates the most is the powder spot. Where the guy goes to get the powder and he goes to throw it in the guy's face and somebody kicks the hand and it goes back in their face.
Yeah.
Everything that Vince hates was in this match.
Yeah.
So, this was kind of corny.
God damn, you get the fucking powder and boom! And now he can't see! He's blind! Put a diaper on him.
It's pretty ridiculous, dude.
Motherfucker.
Okay, let's get to it. March 4th in the Observer. Dave would write, nothing's official, but Hall is expected to join WCW after his contract and legal commitments with WWF are over in late May. I just want to read this passage here directly from Dave. In a situation spoken of with some disdain by WWF CEO Vince McMahon, Hall sent a telegram to McMahon on February 21st, officially giving his 90-day notice that he was leaving the company. On the same day, Hall was suspended by the WWF for 6 weeks for reasons theoretically having nothing to do with him giving notice, causing him to miss his scheduled appearances this past weekend. The suspension would take him a few days past WrestleMania, which Hall was no doubt counting on as being his last big payday before leaving. Bruce, before I continue here, can you tell me, do you remember why Hall was suspended the same day he gave notice?
Well, you kind of put two and two together, and 6 weeks usually meant a violation of the drug policy.
Here's my question: would he have
Were
been
other people suspended at that time? Yeah, I think there were, but I don't remember who. But J.J. Dillon is the one that did it, and I think a lot of people looked at it as suspect at best.
So you're saying if he had
at the time, here's how I was informed of things. I would get a phone call from Vince, and I would say he would tell me so and so is off for 6 weeks. I'd write it down in the book, and we would rebook them. And that was the only involvement that I had in any of those suspensions. That was for legal reasons.
Do you believe that had Hall not given notice, he still would have been suspended and missed WrestleMania?
Who knows? I don't know.
Okay.
I don't know when the test was. I don't know what he failed for or anything else. So I mean that particular thing at that time, we weren't involved with. They could only have one person involved for legal reasons.
Let me continue here. WWF will no doubt attempt to claim the Ramon name and character as their intellectual property, which would mean WCW could not use him as Razor Ramon, nor probably as a Latin character. He is believed to have earned $270,000 in 1995, well down from what he earned in 1994, which is believed to have been well in excess of $400,000. It has been no secret he's been unhappy with the WWF the past few months, both because the office didn't adhere to his wishes that his feud with Goldust be vetoed in favor of working with either Hunter Hearst Helmsley or 123 Kid, and was also unhappy with the baby bottle and diaper angle leading to the most recent pay-per-view match with Kid. He's also missed some house show dates of late because of family pressures. Let's take a pause for that for a minute. Do you remember Razor missing some house show dates and what those conversations may have sounded like? I'm not asking you to divulge anything at home. That's his private business. But let's freestyle. Do you remember him missing the dates and how that comes about?
Yeah, I do. And they were issues at home with his son.
Okay.
So there were reasons that he wanted to be home. I think that there were some people that felt that they didn't know if that was real or not, because Razor had been unhappy and had been expressing his unhappiness. So I don't know. I think that whenever family matters come up in a situation like that, you're going to kind of tend to give them the benefit of the doubt.
Allegedly, this is not a surprise to a lot of people in wrestling, because at the time, WCW is offering guaranteed money, perhaps long-term, with fewer dates, an easier road schedule, less road expenses. And if you got family problems, who doesn't want all that? Meltzer would write, however, there was bitterness within the WWF for how Hall handled his departure, since he was on the road with the entire crew Sunday through Tuesday, giving no indication he was leaving, and was booked prominently in both tag team title tournament and in angles, leading to a planned street fight gimmick match against Goldust. The latter was planned to theoretically take place live in Miami on a downtrodden street and to be beamed up live via satellite on pay-per-view as part of WrestleMania, which is most likely the place that angle would have taken place, similar to the way the Dustin Rhodes Blacktop Bully match was a year ago, that was taped several days in advance and then inserted into the show. Then, when the office crew, after booking Ramon in a strong position for the future, arrived back in the office, they had a telegram from him giving notice. At press time, we've been given no indication if the match and the tag tourney will air as planned or if there will be a change. It was announced at all the weekend house shows that Ramon wouldn't be appearing due to a 6-week suspension. However, on Raw, there was no mention of his name. Do you remember there being heat that he's with the boys and the office on the road and doesn't say boo to anybody?
Tremendous, because for that very reason, he had every opportunity to come and have a face-to-face conversation with Vince and tell him face-to-face. Instead, he chose to do it that way and send a telegram to the office. Yeah, there was heat. They felt that he should have had the face-to-face conversation with Vince.
Does anybody say that to him, or is everybody just kind of mums the word and silently pissed off?
No, Vince said it to him. Vince told him, he goes, here we are. We're together. We got all these plans for you, and you can't tell me that you're planning on leaving? Without doubt, he talked to him about it. Vince was unhappy, and he was hurt. and felt that in Vince's mind, Vince felt that he never got that last opportunity to make an offer, to make a firm offer. Like, you go back and forth in negotiations and finally the other guy wins and you say, well, if I could have only got that last shot, I would have offered you that. So I think that's how Vince felt. But, and probably Scott thinking that Vince would do that. Again, man, it was guaranteed money, less dates, easier schedule.
Why wouldn't you?
Wasn't a bad deal.
Let me pitch this. Hall said he was at a spot show in New Jersey, and he and Taker were going to have to work twice on that show because Sean and Diesel weren't there. So when Hall was in the back, Tony Gurria came up to him and said they wanted him to call the doctor, which was the piss test doctor in Toronto. Hall called, but the doctor wasn't home. So Hall went back to getting dressed for the show, and Gurria told him they wanted him to leave the building. Hall tells Gurria that the results of the test, which was 6 weeks old, was supposed to be confidential. And he says to Gurria, you know the results of my test before I do? And then Hall said to Gurria, I guess they got my notice. Hall said Taker was sitting right next to him and said, yeah, why don't they just push the guy out the door? Hall said he didn't want to leave, but he didn't want his contract to roll over because he wanted to have a serious talk with Vince about money. He wanted $1 million a year. What's your memories of all this happening? Do you remember this Tony Gurria spot show conversation or hearing about that?
Well, first of all, I don't think that Gurria told him, hey, you failed the test. Gurria didn't know why he was asked to leave the building either. I'm sure that was probably JJ delivering that message.
It's 2 and 2.
So,
I mean, 2 plus 2 equals.
Okay, but that's fine. But again, I doubt that Gurria said, hey, you flunked your piss test.
Right.
So, I doubt that happened. I do know that as far as the negotiations back and forth, they had, that the $400,000 number and all that went back and forth. Lot of discussion and disputes over how much that Razor actually got from his WCW deal and how much he asked for from Vince and vice versa. Again, I think it boils down to the allure of less dates, being at home all the time, and guaranteed money. That guaranteed money was a big sticking point with the guys, and that was the biggest lure of all.
I think a lot of people, myself included, have always heard guaranteed money, and I say that as a salesperson. I've made commission my whole life, so the guarantee's kind of up to you. But I guess from Razor Ramon's standpoint, let's put some real money with it here. You work your ass off in 95 and you make 270, but you worked your ass off in 94 and you made 400. What's the fucking difference?
The difference is how well business is doing. And the business was always determined on how much you drew and how much money was coming into the company. If there was less money coming into the company, there was less money to be distributed to the talent. The flip side of that at WCW was, regardless of whether they did 100 people or 100,000 people, he was going to get a check.
No, that's what I'm saying, though. The real lure, in guaranteed, like I don't have guaranteed money in a commission sales job. My guarantee is in my abilities. But in this case, there's a real dollar amount here from not, I don't know how much I'm going to make. No, bro, last year I made less.
Bobby Heenan summed it up the best. I think Bobby Heenan used to say, he goes, what other business in the world do you get a slip of paper and from week to week, you don't know where you're going, how you're going to get there, how much money you're going to make, or anything else, but yet you do it blindly. And that was the business for so many years. That was the business model. And now all of a sudden, guys are saying, hey, we will give you a check every single week, whether you work or not, no matter what our business is doing. This is a guaranteed contract. It had never been done in the business before.
Well, it had been done in every other business, just not this one.
Maybe.
Well, when I say business, I mean athletics. So here's what the Observer says about the way this suspension happens. Ramon was suspended for 6 weeks on February 21st, reported elsewhere as being tested positive for marijuana on a drug test, which coincidentally came back the very same day he gave notice. Given the nature of this business, it naturally raised all kinds of natural suspicions. Not so much that he didn't fail the test, because that would leave the company open to a gigantic lawsuit, and basically there's no way that would happen. But the old double standard theory regarding consistency of punishment. McMahon told the Torch, "There's nothing I can do about that coincidence. People will draw their own conclusions. There's nothing I can do about that. I'm a sitting duck. Anyone can say anything they want about, but one thing for sure, no one has anything to worry about if they don't test positive." What do you think of Vince's comments?
Ding, ding, ding.
I need love that. Well, let's
Couldn't agree more, but I mean, that says it right there.
Let's get to In Your House, Good Friends, Better Enemies. It's April 28th, 1996. Of course, Scott Hall missed WrestleMania 12, but now we're in the first title defense for Shawn Michaels, but not for Razor. Razor is wrestling Vader, and this is Razor's last pay-per-view in the WWF until he returns to Scott Hall in 2002. The match gets 3 1/4 stars. They go nearly 15 minutes. Vader dominates early. Razor gets a strong comeback. And eventually the finish sees Razor go for Razor's Edge, but Vader flips out of it and gives him a hip drop for the pin. And this is kind of the swan song for the big shows, at least, the pay-per-views for Razor. It's also Diesel's last pay-per-view because he's on his way out as well. Diesel lost to Shawn Michaels in the main event. This isn't the famous curtain call, but it is kind of their coup de grace for pay-per-view. What was the atmosphere like amongst the boys in the back for this show?
Light at the end of the tunnel, that there was a feeling that Razor and Diesel, especially after they gave notice, was just such a poison in the locker room that finally they felt that the clique was going to kind of be split up and that the poison was going away and there was an end in sight. So it was relief that we got through the pay-per-view and that they're moving on, and now we can say goodbye and we can concentrate on our own stuff.
Razor's final match in the WWF is May 19th, 1996, Madison Square Garden. It's going to go down in history, of course, as being known as the curtain call. Razor would lose to Hunter Hearst Helmsley that night, and Hall has said as he was walking to the ring for the match, the fans were chanting something like, "Please don't go." And he said Vince always stands just outside the curtains in the garden. So Hall turned around and pointed to Vince and said, "You tell him to give me the money and I'll stay right here." Hall said if Vince would have offered to match the offer from WCW, he would have loved to have stayed in the WWF. And after the match, Hall got on the mic and said to the crowd at MSG, "Say goodbye to the bad guy." Of course, his normal phrase is "say hello to the bad guy." Of course, later that night, after Shawn defeated Diesel in a cage match, Razor and Triple H come out and all four of them hug in the center of the ring. It's a famous moment or an infamous moment, depending on your point of view. And I'm sure we're going to cover the build up to this and the fallout on another show in long form. But quickly here, Bruce, it's a very historic night in the wrestling business for many reasons. What do you want to tell us very briefly about that night in Madison Square Garden?
Oh God, there's so many things. First of all, the finish, Razor on Triple H's pedigree. When Triple H went for the pedigree, Hall just shot his arms up for Triple H to grab him. It was terrible. It was an embarrassment, in my opinion. Razor never got out his "say goodbye to the bad guy." Razor took the microphone and said, "Say goodbye," and we cut his microphone. Vince was not happy. The curtain call at the end, you know, we've discussed it before. We'll discuss it again. But at the time, to me, it was just a slap in the face to the wrestling business and a slap in the face to all the guys in the back that were going to be staying and that were going to continue on. I just thought it was very disrespectful to Vince, who had employed him for all those years, gave him his first big break where he actually did make some money in the business and made him that star that WCW wanted to take and move on. So, you know, it was what it was. I didn't like it. I think that everybody in my clique of Vince and Cornette and I, that night that we traveled and we went out to dinner that night, we were upset and not happy with it, and just thought it was very unprofessional and not the right way to go out.
Well, people were in for a shock because Scott Hall would walk through the crowd and debut on Nitro, and business was changed forever.
And one of the greatest things that ever happened to the business in every way, shape, or form, because the guaranteed contracts changed the business. The fact that Scott Hall and Diesel came out made us competitive and get off of our ass creatively and everything else. So hindsight, great thing had happened.
And it happened just 1 week after. I guess that's worth mentioning. I think that MSG show was on a Sunday. I think it goes down on the 19th. Hall debuts on May 27th. So you're talking about 8 days later, everything looks a little different. We're going to talk about that another time in long form. But before we do, I want to ask you, what do you think will be Scott Hall's legacy in the WWF?
Overall, the big picture is going to be, the bad guy. And I think people are going to remember him in WWF as Razor Ramon. I think in the business, what I just said, the moves that Scott Hall made, and they changed the business. They changed the business of the business, and they changed the landscape creatively of the wrestling business. And for that, I thank him. Because, like I said, it got everybody off of their ass. And without him doing that, who knows where we would be today?
Well, I know where we would be, and we would be out of time. But first, we always like to let the fans ask some questions, and we want to encourage you to do that right now. Cruise on over to Facebook.com/something to wrestle. You can participate in the conversation we're going to have next week when we cover SummerSlam 2002. We're quickly approaching the 15-year anniversary of that show. We promised it to you on the 25th, and that's what we're going to do next week. But this week, you can go ahead and ask your questions right here on Facebook. It's Facebook.com/something to wrestle. Let's do some rapid fire questions. Bruce, are you ready? In your opinion, did anyone have a better 5 moves of doom than Scott Hall? The 360 punch, the fall away slam, the choke slam, the razor's edge, and the belly to back superplex.
I thought that was a hell of a combination because he can make it different every single time.
He won the 1992 Pro Wrestling Illustrated Most Improved Award. Did the boys care about those gimmick awards? Did you remember anybody taking them too seriously?
Dusty cared about them. Baby, I'm the most popular wrestler, PWI, baby. When Hogan won, the only reason he won is because he's up there in New York.
For someone who's...
Real vote, I saw him Bill after the death. I won.
For someone who's never taken a bump, how would Razor's Edge compare to a power bomb?
You fuck that shit because you're not coming down flat, and at least on a power bomb, the right guy giving it to you, you're coming down flat.
Do you believe Scott Hall had it?
Yes, without a doubt. Scott Hall had it and everything else to go with it.
Well, the natural follow-up is, did he have it when he was with the AWA or WCW the first time?
He did. It just hadn't been uncovered.
Do you remember Scott taking wrestlers under his wing outside of the clique, just trying to help them out?
Not really outside the clique, but he definitely took the kid under his wing and took Aldo Montoya under his wing.
There's lots of rumor and innuendo that Scott Hall's the guy who came up with the crow gimmick for Sting. Do you think Scott could ever be considered to be a creative force in the WWE, like an agent or a part of creative?
Yeah, I think that Scott Hall was always coming up with gimmicks and finishes for other guys. I think he's got a great creative mind.
If you weren't in the clique, who was the most or least approachable? So of the group, who was the biggest dick, I guess?
Who was the biggest dick?
Yeah.
Probably Diesel.
Wow. That's like I would have assumed Sean Waltman was the least, and then Diesel right above him, and it would have been, Scott or Shawn Michaels near the top.
No, I would say probably, Sean Waltman was probably the most approachable of all of them, and then, Triple H.
How different do you think Razor's career would have been had Vince McMahon seen the movie Scarface? Now, and a lot of people aren't going to understand what I mean there, but do you believe that Vince would have let Razor go with this gimmick had he seen Scarface and understood who he was kind of mocking?
That's where I'm going. If Vince had seen the movie and understood what Scarface was all about, I don't think that he ever would have gone as far as he went with the Razor Ramon gimmick.
Yeah, I mean, there's a rumor out there that it was a long time before Vince understood what the Razor was even used for in Scarface.
Yeah, like I said, if Vince had seen the movie and understood what Scarface was all about and the whole Tony Montana, I don't think that it would have ever happened. Chico.
Do you think Jerry Jarrett knew what the Razor was for?
Well, what you do is you take the razor and you use it to chop up. It's good with chicken or apples, well, and walnuts.
Hypothetically, who smartened Vince up to what the Razor was for?
I'm pretty sure that he understands, what a razor's for.
God damn it, pal. You use a razor to get a little color there. A little tomato juice.
Does he call it tomato juice?
No, I just did.
Okay. I guess my question is, does anybody ever say, hey, so you're cool with him talking about cocaine?
I think people assumed because he did the gimmick that he knew what the hell it was. It's kind of like they assumed that he knew what the hell
Godfather
it was with Godfather.
Yeah, I didn't say that. Allegedly, Scott has said that Vince played a big hand in shooting all these vignettes, and he really loved the character, and that makes a lot of sense considering the push was there so far. Do you believe that Vince had plans to make this character the world champion, but Hall being difficult to deal with at various times kept him from being champ?
Being difficult, no. And it was more an issue of timing because Vince would often say,
I can see that bastard with the WWF championship around his waist, with all the gold and oozing machismo. The only gold he's missing is the championship.
Do you believe that there was, once Vince understood that Razor Ramon is essentially a drug dealer, that's what kept him from making him the WWE champion, that maybe it would have affected the company's marketability, or it would have just been a negative stereotype and just a bad look that the champion wrestler over there in that wrestling is a drug dealer?
No, because I don't think Vince ever viewed him as a drug dealer.
Ever.
Even once he ever.
Okay.
I think he viewed him as a Razor Ramon, his creation, a bad guy.
Okay. There's a rumor that the WWE has spent over $1 million on rehab for Scott Hall over the years. Would you think that's even remotely in the ballpark? That number just seems ridiculously high to me.
No, that wouldn't shock me at all. That shit can be expensive.
Do you think that Vince is upset and takes it personal when a guy like Scott Hall leaves after, Scott comes in kind of limping along in his career as the Diamond Stud and, all the different gimmicks that he had and he's kind of a journeyman at that point. And now he's a star and he's leaving. Do you think Vince has some sort of, and it's probably internal, he probably doesn't say it out loud, but he has to feel, I created him. How dare he? Do you think that exists within Vince?
I think that Vince takes it personally and believe it or not, is actually hurt when guys do that. Because he looks at them almost like he looks at his children. And when they leave him, he takes it personal like one of his kids is leaving.
We talked a lot about guys that, Scott didn't like working with. Do you think of anyone who didn't like working with Scott?
No, I think people would line up to work with Scott. Scott was a great worker. He was smooth, and when you got in the ring, Scott pretty much, for the most part, with the exception of Shane Douglas, made everybody he worked with look good.
Scott's gone on record as saying he feels like live TV and the introduction of it into wrestling really separated the good talkers from the not so good talkers. And then in a previous era, guys like Hogan and Warrior rarely had to do live promos. But now, in his era, you had to be able to do it live, and that made all the difference in the world. Do you think that's a fair assessment?
I think live TV changed it because there were no retakes, and it was out there. Whatever happened, you were exposed for the world to see. And talkers, great talkers that could ad lib and go with the flow, were going to rise to the top every single time. But again, Hogan hung in the live era. Don't know if Warrior could have, but yeah, the cream's going to rise to the top.
Who upset Vince the most when they left, or who was he the most angry with? Either or when they left.
As far as like Razor and Diesel, or just
anybody
overall?
In general ever
Hogan.
in life.
Hogan and Savage.
Okay.
Hogan hurt him bad.
Do you believe that Razor should have been world champ?
I think that he would have made a good world champ, yes. I think that he's the guy that could have carried the title and been a good champion as a heel.
What are some weaknesses that Scott Hall had in his game?
Damn, I don't know, because I thought he was a pretty damn well-rounded performer that could do it all, because he could talk, he could go, and he could adapt to his opponent.
All right, so I guess I set you up
I don't
here.
know what the hell his weaknesses are.
What is Triple H better at than Scott Hall?
Getting over. No. Marrying the boss's daughter. Shit, I don't know.
I mean, listen, that's the answer.
You know what? I mean, I put them both on the same plane when it comes to in-ring work.
But isn't that crazy, though? Because I think most people think that Scott Hall's a better promo. And I think most people think he has more natural charisma. And I think a lot of people would say he's just as good of, if not a better in-ring performer as far as just match quality. But one guy has had more world titles than I've got fingers, and the other guy never had one. And a lot of people will just automatically reduce that to some sort of substance issue. But when he was there the first time, that didn't seem to be nearly as sideways as it got once he went to WCW.
And I don't think it was, but definitely was in latter years. But I think if Razor had stayed around, he might have gotten to that point. But yes, I do believe he's just as good of a worker as Triple H is. And it's just a product of different times and the different opportunities that were afforded them. Razor, as Razor, and even the Scott Hall as Scott Hall, he was still doing Razor. Triple H is a little bit, got more layers to him, in my opinion.
Jesse on Twitter or on Facebook wants to know, what was the greasy stuff in his hair? Everybody's about to be disappointed.
Why is that?
Well, it's just water.
Nah, it's Grease R Us.
All right, that leads me to my next question. Where'd you get all the toothpicks?
Toothpicks R Us. Same place we got all the razors. Razors R Us.
Oh my gosh.
Gold chains R Us.
Do you think that the Razor Ramon character is sort of the precursor to the Attitude Era? I mean, I guess settle this for us. Razor's supposed to be someone in the drug business, right?
No.
All right, what is he?
A bad guy. Bad guy from the streets of Miami that kicks people's ass.
What does he do for a living there in the streets of Miami?
Beat people up.
But he's not involved in any sort of underworld, underbelly. That's all.
No, why would you even think that?
Did Razor have a reputation for being stiff with the enhancement guys?
No. No, I can never ever remember anybody complaining about Razor.
Was it known by the boys or the office that Scott Hall killed a guy and was charged with murder? Did it ever come up?
I didn't even know that until till long after. And I want to say I didn't even know that until the NWO came back in like 2002. I didn't know that. So I'm going to say it wasn't widely known. No.
Next week, it's SummerSlam 2002, but this week it was all about the bad guy. Anything else you'd like to mention about the bad guy?
No, as I said, I thank Razor Ramon for all his contributions and just the changes. It's amazing the changes that his one decision had on the overall business over the years to come and what we know today is the wrestling business.
Well, and we'll see you next week here with more wrestling business. If you haven't already, pick up tickets right now at boxofgimmicks.com. We'd love to see you this Sunday. SummerSlam Sunday, right at Gramercy Theater. There's only one place to snag those tickets, and it is boxofgimmicks.com. Hook it up, make it happen. You'll be glad you did. And don't forget our man Andrew and all the fine folks over at GoPro Wrestling on YouTube. They're going to be there passing out free swag. Go like their page right now and then pick up some swag at our show this weekend. It's youtube.com/GoPro Wrestling. And tune in next week right here on Something to Wrestle With. Bruce Prichard.